It's time to find your seats, please. All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the April 24th, 2023 Grants Pass City Council Workshop. We have a lot on our plate this afternoon, and we're going to get started with big stuff first, I guess. Budget discussion. Take it away, JC.
Good morning, Mayor and Councilors. Just as a little bit of a recap, a few weeks ago, staff brought to you that we were potentially going to be under the 30% general fund balance policy. Council direction at that point was to make budget reductions to meet that policy. Staff later came back with recommended suggested cuts of about $2.4 million. And then council would requested the matrix exercise after that, and that was provided Wednesday night to council. I have a packet of things for you, so I'll go through them one by one. So the first is going to be the current vacancy list. We do have an update on this. As of Friday, 2 firefighters have resigned, and we kind of knew that was a potential based on what we'd already been previously talking about. The next is a short description of program areas and activities that each department does, and that was provided to council after Wednesday. I got one counselor's budget matrix a little late, and that is the one with the orange on the top, and so it won't be on the totaled summary page, but that is Councilor De La Grange's. The next worksheet are all the descriptions of each of the program areas and the reduced budget cuts that were given to you on Wednesday. And then the very, very large piece of paper is at the time we have everybody side by side, each of the counselors. And at this time, I guess I could take any questions, but I'm guessing more of this discussion is between yourselves.
Thanks, JC. Are there any questions? Valerie?
Yes, I was a little confused. I went through this numerous times this weekend, and I couldn't call you because you weren't working, and so I didn't. But I wasn't sure whether I was supposed to put down what I wanted to go away, what I wasn't willing to support, and so I wasn't completely clear on that. And so anything that I was willing to support, I just left that amount. So I think I might have done mine backwards, but I'm not sure.
If you were willing to support that as the same amount that was in the staff recommended amount, then that is truly your submission. And then any zero line is things that you did not want to see go away.
Well, I tried to zero, but the thing would not accept a zero.
In the changed amount, if you left it blank like you did, it was fine.
Okay. And so, but what I did do is I put the total that I wanted to get out of there because it wouldn't accept a zero, if that made any sense. It's the only way it worked for me. So example down there, right there.
So you want this in reverse?
I don't want to take that away. I don't want it taken away, if that makes sense. So I don't know whether mine ended up backwards or whatever. So in full disclosure, I was confused.
Make that change really quick.
All right, so on Lovelace, we're actually doing the opposite of what it says on here? Okay. Okay, let's wait for JC to catch up for a second. Ready, Joel? Oh, Vanessa, go ahead.
I was going to say, since you're on my column, I'm so sorry I sent you a blank copy.
No, it's okay.
Did you input that, the pace that you did, was that staff recommendations? Okay, I agree with all staff recommendations except for 2, so we can get my column out of the way. The only 2 I'd like deleted is the closure of the Hillcrest Station and also crisis support. And then underneath police alternatives, the 2 vacant police officer positions. I don't know the amount for that.
I'll just put in what Councilor De La Grange estimated. It's going to be close-ish.
Thank you.
Sarah, I have a question.
Yeah, Joel, go ahead.
Well, 2 questions. First is, it seems to me like this is an exercise in assuming that you have a $1.79 levy without any additional funding, what would the impact be? Which the council has previously said was very important to look at, and this is an iterative process. Would you disagree with either one of those statements?
No. As far as where we sit, though, we don't have any concrete decisions on any future funding.
Right.
And so the estimation of the $1.79 is that, yes, next year is the last year of the levy, and so $1.79 is what we'll submit.
So this is a blueprint if, for the existing condition with funding, if you have a $1.79 and you don't have any additional funding, this is different ways that you could have that implemented. And then the reductions and the costs are an important thing to communicate not only to us as we make decisions, but to our public.
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay. There were several people I noticed that didn't partake in the exercise to see what the impacts of those cuts would be. Could we hear from them as to why they didn't, or they have some thoughts? It's obviously they were trying to make a statement, but I'm not sure what it was.
So Brian's was a little bit late, and that is the orange one. And so it's the same rows, same columns. Vanessa just filled hers out on the fly really quick here. And then we updated Councilor Lovelace. So what's on the screen right now, I could try and make it as big or as small as we can read, but.
Okay, thank you.
Have you added De La Grange to your form up there?
Yeah, it's on the left, sorry, it's just.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody have any questions for JC? Rob?
Yeah, very quickly, I just need to respond to what Joel said. I have nothing listed here, and it's not a correct assumption to say that I was trying to make a statement. It's actually completely incorrect. I have questions about several of these items. That would be more correct. So, JC, on number 1, the Workman's Comp Reserve, it says, by switching to an annual policy, the reserve, blah, 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 you know, does not need to be as large. So when did that switch occur?
Oh, well, it's like 14 months ago. It's really recent.
14 months ago. So when it says that we might need a balance to still cover any outstanding claims from the switch, how long do we need to be concerned with outstanding claims potentially coming in?
It's about 3 years.
3 years?
I think the maximum payout right now on those 3 years is 150,000, but I could be wrong on that. And so.
Per event, you mean? Per occurrence?
No, that's in total for all of them that we currently have on the books as far as retroactive plans. More or less, we let those kind of work their way through, and the cost typically goes down.
Okay. So I'm not sure how anyone really could have said take away 367,000 without actually knowing how long we need to be concerned about being on the hook for that. So you're saying after 3 years, someone cannot come after the city?
It expires, I think, 5 years after the claim, it expires.
So if we remove the 367,000 and someone were to come after us after we've removed that money, what would the effect be?
So we currently pay like medical benefits, so a premium at the beginning of the year. And now it changes based on our actual experience.
Right.
And so as of right now, we pay about 300-ish thousand in annual premium. And we have 1.2 million, and so using about 500 or so thousand, we still have a pretty solid balance to cover us for at least a whole year's worth, even if our premium were to go up. We're at a 0.67 mod factor, which means we're doing pretty good.
So in another roughly year and a half or a little more, we could essentially let that balance go to almost nothing, right? Not be at risk.
I probably wouldn't recommend that because we pay it all July 1st. And so how we kind of charge the departments is they pay through payroll throughout the year. And so I would probably recommend that we keep about a year's worth at the front load so you can make that payment, and then departments can pay in later on throughout the rest of the year, depending on what their staffing is.
Okay, thank you. So on number 2, on the employee wellness program contributions, there's several things listed there. The only dollar amount that we got was the $40 a month for health club memberships, potentially towards health club memberships. And I'm just wondering, what percentage of that 26,000 is made up of the $40 a month? Is it almost all of it, or?
No, it's minimal.
It's minimal.
I think because how stringent we are in the policy and that you have to show proof,
Right.
Participation has gone down. I think we only spend as a city $1,300 to $1,500 in reimbursements
A month?
a year.
A year? Wow. Okay. So the rest of that 26,000 is ergonomic equipment, employee assistance, and all the other things listed.
Appreciation. We do have a little bit of a balance in there too to keep that program, but if we're not contributing to it in the future, at some point that'll have to go away.
Okay. I'm not sure, if anyone else has questions, I mean, I can yield the floor, but I've got a few more, I guess. So, and I'm not sure about this one, if, 'cause I discussed this with another counselor, and they kind of gave me a different perspective than I thought I might have had. So on number 19, delayed development code amendments, 30,000. Now, is that something that we have the expertise in-house to accomplish? Between either, I guess, the community development director or the planning director, Mark, or whoever?
In-house, we do. It would just be a portion of our time in terms of we would have to dedicate to a long-range planning. So yes, in short.
Thank you. Which will bring me to another point, but I guess I'll bring up that second point. So about, I don't know, maybe it might be 2 years ago now, when I brought up the concept of administrative leave, which I don't think was actually even proposed on here. And the last time I brought it up, the reason I guess it didn't get any traction is that, you know, I was told that, well, if you, administrative leave, for those who don't know what it is, because there are probably some that don't know, what it's up to 2 days off per quarter for the managers who are participating basically in any after-hours activities, meaning council meetings or whatever. And if I'm wrong about that, I can, you know, Aaron could correct me. But and it gets a lot of use. So people are, you know, the managers are getting potentially 8 days a year off and paid. So my thinking on that was, We were told last time, well, administrative leave, there's no dollar figure next to that, so it would be no savings, to get rid of that program. But I'm under the belief that if, let's just say, the planning director or the community development director, were working 8 more days a year, they could do the delayed development code amendments that would normally, that are listed here as $30,000. And I would also believe that if they were in the office more, they could do additional work that maybe their subordinates are getting paid overtime to do. So I don't necessarily know that leaving administrative leave off this discussion is appropriate. And there's a good example of where possibly doing away with that program could save us 30 grand. So I know in the private sector, there are basically no managers that get paid extra for going to meetings. That's just what managers do. That's completely a public sector creation that I don't happen to think is correct. But anyway, so that had to do with that question on the 30 grand there. And then another question I've got on number 23 on planning. We were told, I believe, and I can't remember exactly when, but in the last 6 months or so, it might have been in strategic planning, we were told that permits are, there are much fewer lately, I guess, that development is down right now. And I know that in 2008, we got to the point during that major recession, which we're not in quite yet, we got to the point where literally there were planners sitting around doing absolutely nothing for days at a time because there was just nothing to do. And eventually, we did have layoffs. But my question on that one is, and I don't know who to ask, it might be Aaron or it could be a community development director, but at what point, we were told that permits were down, and I'm just not sure how much they're down, and at what point would we, I know that we're finally fully staffed in community development or in planning, but at what point, would we have a surplus of employees when figuring in the potentially reduced number of permits? At what point, does that get to, at what point are we overstaffed?
I don't have those numbers to be able to report that to you today, but at some point, if there was an economic downturn and the permitting did not, was at a level where it did not provide justification for number of staff, then we would look at downsizing. Cities have gone through downsizing phases based on the economy.
Okay, that's good to hear. Last time with that, and I'm not, I'm not trying to take credit, but there was no impetus or initiation from the city manager or the staff to downsize at all. It came from me, and then I got blamed by the employees for getting them laid off, but the fact is a councilor shouldn't even have had to do it. The manager should have taken that responsibility. So I would hope that we would be keeping that in mind, because we were told in the last few months that permits are down. Maybe they're back up now, but we were told that there was a reduction over what they had been last year.
Yeah, that's a responsibility of the city manager to make sure we're running efficiently and that the services are provided in the most efficient way, and that includes staff time. And as you may be aware, we have shown a history of downsizing ourselves. I eliminated one department director, and I also eliminated an assistant city manager from the positions when I felt as though it was we can run efficiently in other ways.
I will add one more point too.
Yeah.
Just because we don't have permits, there's still stuff coming that we're mandatorily obligated to do from the state.
Okay, thank you. I guess no more questions. I have some comments, but that's probably at a later time. Thanks.
Okay, any questions for JC right now? Okay,
I just
go
had-
ahead, Joel.
I was a little bit hazy, when I have an employee working for me and I order them to do something, I have to pay them. So like committee meetings or whatever. And then there's management, and then there's the union or whatever. And as part of that, we have labor laws that everyone needs to abide, including the private sector. And I can't, in the private sector, I can't direct somebody to work and not pay them, and if it's over 40 hours a week, it has to be overtime. But I can offer them administrative leave. Labor laws, we don't have Augustus here. What is the status of our managers with regards to the labor laws and making sure we're legal with how we compensate people?
So I can't maybe legally answer all of your questions, but from status point of those who do get administrative leave, they are exempt, and so they're exempt from overtime. And there is that expectation in their job duties that they're going to be here more than 40 hours a week. However, there seems to be some movement potentially around the country of getting rid of that kind of exempt status and having to pay for overtime and or comp time for those positions. It's kind of a hot topic in government right now.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're legal. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I guess from my point of view, the goal of putting together this matrix was just to make sure that we had a majority. So if we could scan and look for any places where we didn't have at least 5 counselors, we can talk about those points. Make sure that you're catching, I guess you can see Yunker on the end there.
Got some other, so let's see if I can hide these in a way that makes sense. Try and get them all on one screen. Do that right? Can we see? I think we can see all of them now.
Except I need glasses apparently, but but no, that does help simplify it. All right, so I don't understand what this first one is exactly, but what do we have going on there? Riker has added something.
Yeah, he has a reduction in the general program ops. This has small expenditures for non-specific committee expenses, artwork appropriations for some carryover for previous grants from COPA, some utility assistance events, and it actually gives a large portion of this money for engineering support. And then there's another portion of common space building maintenance.
It's this is item number 4 on the sheet in front of you.
Yeah, and this one's a tough one too, because there's a fallout from reducing engineering. So if we remove this support, engineering will have to go back and charge all of the other departments more.
Okay, Rick, did you want to explain at all what your idea was here?
Just looking for different areas that we could reduce in that wouldn't have a major impact, but I don't need to maintain that. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, so this was something that was added beyond what staff had originally recommended, if I'm looking at this right? Okay. Let's move on to the next one, which is what, Hillcrest Fire Station, so that's going to be line 37. And how many, who and what do we have going on there? We have just 2 in support of that, so 5, or I guess 6 would not be. Rick, did you have something?
Well, I was not supportive of closing the Hillcrest Fire Station for obvious reasons.
Okay. And I think that the way that we had really structured this is eliminating 3 fire positions that would result in the closure of the Hillcrest Station. So I guess, to be clear, are you not supporting the freezing of those 3 positions, or is your comment specific to Hillcrest rather than, let's say, we did discuss Redwood? We need to differentiate. So I guess I'm going to assume for now that anybody who said no in this category is not supportive of eliminating the 3 firefighter positions. Okay, so it looks like we actually do have a solid majority that's not in support of that.
Sarah, could I just make a comment?
Go ahead.
So the reason I put that up there was before this council talked about being transparent with people and the impacts of going with the $1.79 levy with no additional monies. That doesn't mean in an iterative process that's what's going to happen. But we need to display those impacts openly and honestly. And so I think with that as an assumption of our funding, that this is probably a valid option, not that I would favor implementing it. The other thing that I would just like to mention, and it's on the periphery and not part of this topic, is we have the Yankee pot roast that we can sell. It's a capital asset, and we can reinvest that in a capital asset in Hillcrest Station to upgrade their computer systems. So that over the long term, we have an upgraded system, because right now it is on its last legs. And so when we get to the agenda review, I'm going to suggest we put that on there. I haven't talked to any of you. If you think you want to discuss that, I would encourage you to support me in that.
All right, so at this stage, I would say that freezing those firefighter positions is off the table, but obviously that's a good chunk of money, so we'll have to look at further down the list how we're going to deal with that. Next up, police captain. So that's going to be line 55. And what is going on there? So we have 4. Anybody want to talk about why they either supported or didn't support that? Rob?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just a little slow, but just backstepping one item, with regards to Joel's suggestion of potentially selling Yankee pot roast and potentially using that to improve the issues at the Hillcrest Station, which were really, I guess, the major things that I remember Chief Larkin referring to as far as why he preferred closing that station. If that station were to be brought up to we'll say, brought back up to really good working order. I'm not necessarily saying that I wouldn't support closing a different station. So if we had a way to bring Hillcrest back up in good working order, I think I'd be open to the discussion of potentially closing the Redwood station and laying off 3 firefighters if that's what it takes to balance the budget. And I'm hoping that we'd find things that are lower priority than that. But to me, as I remember Chief Larkin talking about it, he was talking more about the computer systems, about why he chose that station than the actual strategic location of it. So I think that we need to bring that up again after we discuss potentially bringing it up, the systems there in good working order.
Well, I think for the time being, this is actually about the 3 positions and not about which station.
Well, the way it was framed to us, though, is the way, as I remember it, Chief Larkin, one of the main reasons he chose that station was because it wasn't in good working order. So the fact that they've combined these 2 on for this exercise is either disingenuous or confusing or just a mistake. So it
It
really
is-
is two issues.
It is slightly confusing, but I would say even if we count you as a yes, that gets to 3 counselors interested in potentially going along with that, and so 5.
I understand if other counselors were to consider Joel's proposal, it may be that we would do be 5.
That's why I'm
potentially.
asking you to just consider it on the basis of the staff positions and not on the station.
Yeah.
Because they
Well,
are-
I would consider it based on, if it was a different station, I would consider that as still being on the table, if it needed to be.
Okay, is there anybody else who wants to go along with that? Okay, that still leaves us at 5, saying to take that one off. Okay, police captain, so I think we're looking at kind of 4 and 4 split right there, so discussion, Rick?
JC, I'm willing to add my name there to freeze that, hiring for 6 months.
Okay, that puts it at 5. Any further discussion?
I'll
Val?
just say the reason I didn't believe in that is because I know Todd Moran and I know how much he does at that police station. And that is, he does have, 6 months without him there, I think could have a big impact on our police department. So that's why I chose not to do that.
Joel?
Well, it's, having been through this exercise many times previous, it's, the first common thing is to freeze vacant positions, and that's what this is. So it's a good initial step. It doesn't mean that we eliminate the position at this point in time, but we freeze the hiring at this point in time until we figure it out.
All right, I think we're at 5. We'll consider that one frozen for now. Next up, crisis support. And it looks like we have a majority in favor of keeping that funding. Any discussion? All right, let's consider that one funded for now. Next up, community service officer. We're at 4 on that, 4 and 4. Discussion? Joel?
Well, again, this is similar to what we talked about with Hillcrest. I think we need to be transparent with people. If you go along with the assumption that this is a $1.79 levy with no additional revenue, there's got to be cuts in spending. I mean, that's just a simple fact. And you need to be transparent with folks and what those effects could be. And at this point in time, if under that scenario, if we don't get additional revenue from somewhere, that would, I think, be one of the cuts.
Rob?
Yeah, initially, when I was looking at that, I probably would have agreed with Joel, but I think that that's probably short-sighted thinking, and I'm going to explain why. We've, over the years, kind of looked at CSOs, we'll say, as a low-priced half a cop, and we've kind of looked at the parking enforcement person as a low-priced CSO. Well, the fact is, if you had less CSOs, or if you had, let's say the parking guy was gone and the CSO person was downtown more, or if you had less CSOs and you have traffic, you've got traffic management at collision sites and things like that, does that mean you're going to end up paying firemen or cops more overtime? So I really think you need to think that through, because you're still going to have people at crash scenes, and rather than being a CSO, who's it going to be? I don't think that we're going to volunteer. I don't think Aaron's going to do it. It means a higher priced person is going to be there. So I think that needs to be thought out.
Joel?
And so one of the things that is really common is to deny that there can be any effects to a funding shortage. They are real. And we need to be honest with ourselves and with the public. And to not do so does a disservice, and it feels uncomfortable. So yes, we do need CSOs. I would not disagree with that at all. Yes, we need the Hillcrest Fire Station. And yes, at the present level with these assumptions, we don't have the money to pay for it. And so if you don't have the money to pay for it, you end up with reduced services that we need to display. And that's what we have here.
Rick?
The reason I indicated I wanted to retain the CSO position is basically what Rob has been saying. I feel putting the extra time and demands upon the other police officers is not fair, and I just appreciate what the CSOs do and did not want to lose that. Thank you.
Rob?
So just quickly, and not that it's, we talk about transparency, would that actually save us money at a crash site? Somebody's going to be at that crash site, and I question whether or not if the CSO is gone, that just means we're going to have a fireman or a police officer there. So I think that that's part of the transparency that we need to be sure we're talking about.
And in response to that, and we need to move on here, but in response to that, you need somebody there that has authority, and full authority to take action, especially if a law has been broken and the CSO doesn't have that. And they're not armed. And so, if you're gonna cut back to basics, which one you're gonna have? You're gonna have a police officer or a CSO show up? So that was my logic. You can disagree with that, but that was my logic.
All right, I think we have a hung jury at the moment on that one. Let's move on to the next, and we'll come back later. Sobering Center, is that where we're at? Oh, there we are, 67. What's going on with that one? It looks like we have solid support for keeping the funding.
I can address that. That was a suggestion that I added to the spreadsheet, so no one else yet has had an opportunity to weigh in on this one. We currently give the Sobering Center $130,000 a year, and I know that they just received an infusion of money from Measure 110. Unfortunately, I don't know how much that is, but I think it's fairly significant. And I know that they have multiple other funding sources for that facility, so I thought that we might be able to reduce our payment there.
All right. Might be worth considering. I mean, do we have any information about their funding?
Hello, Mayor and Council. First of all, I want to apologize. I'm a little under the weather today, so if I look a little out of it, it's because I'm a little ill, I think. But as far as anecdotally, I can probably speak to the Sobering Center and their funding. Yeah, I think they're going to get some burn dollars, but they fall under a different category. I don't consider our Sobering Center seeing that much long-term funding into the future because they're not a detox facility, so it's a different category. So I'm just speaking anecdotally with you all right now, and also to let you know, if we lose Sobering Center funding, we have no place to take people. We can try to take them to the jail if the jail will accept them. And then also, when it comes to, because I have an opportunity to talk about the crisis support, we give them $50,000 a year. I think we're one of the only cities in Southern Oregon that support crisis support. The last time we were up here in '21, I did some research on their budget, and I thought it was about $800,000. So when I was asked to do an exercise to come up with recommendations as the chief of police for our organization, I gave you a solid list. So I just wanted to give you that too.
Should ask you while you're up here, Chief, sorry. Get that blood flowing. This, because what's going to come up in a moment here too is a suggestion to freeze a couple of officer positions, and we also have the CSO position. What are your thoughts?
Well, I did not put up the freeze police officers. If you recall from '21, I recommended we freeze a firefighter, a police officer, a CSO, a records clerk, and a dispatcher. All of those positions come from the PD, except for a firefighter. I was told no on the firefighter and to take everybody else, plus a second police officer. So I'm 100% against freezing another police officer. 2 more police officers at that. Let me gather my thoughts. I had notes back there. I think we currently have 11 people in various forms of vacancy, training, or FMLA. So when you have 57 police officers minus about 10 or 11, we've already hit the wall. Your police officers are working an excessive amount of overtime. And it's not just the police officers, it's the dispatchers and everybody else that supports that. We need everybody to maintain the operation. And when we talk about the CSO, you have to look at priorities. And sure, traffic accidents are a priority, but at the end of the day, I need to make sure my police officers are safe, and I need to make sure this community stays safe. I made a small list of just a few things that happened over the last 4 days, to include a riot at the OIA that we had to go to include a stabbing of a juvenile, to include a robbery, to include a forcible rape, to include overdose deaths, to include overdoses in general. That's just on top of everything else we have to do. It's next to impossible lately to maintain staffing. And I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that this will affect not only the community, but the police officer safety as well. My guys are really, really, really busy. We answer about 60,000 calls a year. I don't want to speak about the fire department's calls, but I'm just telling you that we answer about 60,000 a year. The Sheriff's Department will probably reduce their staffing some more. The Oregon State Police shut off at 2. So while everybody's asleep, we're out there. We're the only ones out there. I talked about being on an island. We are on an island. We don't have support from any other organization coming to help us, especially in the wee hours of the morning. We were fortunate over the weekend when a fella high on meth and maybe fentanyl. Yeah, he stole a car. Yeah, he rammed it into one of my police officers. Yeah, we had to chase him. He almost got into a tractor trailer going southbound on I-5. And then we had to use less lethal techniques to take him into custody. That was the Grants Pass police officers, to include me out there in my slippy shoes running up a grassy embankment to try to help out police officers. So I just wanted to share that's kind of where we're at. You can probably tell some of the frustration in my voice, but I have to represent the city because I was hired to protect the community, and I also have to look out for the officers as well. And that includes our dispatchers, and that includes our support staff and our CSOs. I don't want to minimize anybody. But when I'm asked to come and bring a number, just give me the number, and I will make good decisions. I think I have a track record of making good decisions, and I'll continue to do that.
I think there's a question for you from,
Oh,
no, from
I
Brian.
just had a quick question. Thank you, Chief. You mentioned that we have 57 sworn officers, is that right?
We have 57 FTEs that we can hire. Currently, we have 3 in backgrounds. 1 we just gave a letter to. 2 others are going through the process. We have 2 currently on FMLA. I don't think they're going to come back. I think we have 2 on light duty. I think we have a couple in training, and we have 2 retirements pending. If you freeze more police officers, that means I can't even get back to 0. I'm always behind. Every single year, police budget turns back probably $1 million+ in ending fund returns, ending fund balance. Our officers are burnt, they're spent, and they need reinforcement. It takes about 12 to 18 months to train a police officer. And I don't want to minimize any other role or responsibility, but that takes a long time, and people don't want to be cops anymore. So it's really hard to find the right person to come to Grants Pass. We have 3 amazing people in backgrounds. It would be a great loss if I had to call those people up and say, sorry, try again someplace else.
And I think it's important here because I don't want to get too much off track, but this exercise, we had a number we were providing you. And from an operations perspective, we tried to provide you with something that was best for the organization and best for the community when it comes to level service. So if these things, whatever doesn't match with where council wants to go, give us the number and we will come back to you with how that would happen and or have that level of service discussion with you. It's council's role is that level of service. Management role is organization and running the organization. So it's not fully appropriate to say freeze three firefighters or freeze 3 officers without taking into consideration how that affects the operation. So if you're wanting the dollar value of 3 police officers frozen, okay, that's fine. We'll come back to you with how we're going to make that happen. But it might not be in 3 officers. It could be in a CSO. It could be in a records. It could be in whatever it may be. Because we have to make sure we have the safety of all of our crews out there in the field. And there's pieces together that are aligned, that play with each other, that are not in the mix of this conversation. We need to make sure that those systems are made whole and that are safe for everybody. So again, from this conversation, if we can keep it at the upper level of, if these don't match what you would like, let's talk level of service and dollar numbers. We'll come back to you with how that's going to happen.
So I think it's fully appropriate for any counselor to suggest any idea. Not that it's going to get traction, but, you know, to have less suggestions come forward is not helpful. More suggestions is better. So just wanted to respond with that. And then also, Chief, you don't have to get up. He's got the mic. But you mentioned that that the department typically returns about $1 million in unspent funds. Is that something that we could work into this exercise?
I think it's already been plugged into the exercise because of our historical. Our ending fund balance with PD is usually good, and I would imagine as I look over to JC that he's probably equated that into this discussion already.
So yes and no. As far as the direction we got from council, the 30% is the bottom, and that's with 100% spent, and that's how we plan for that. Do we also expect the departments to return 6%? Of course, but that's not something necessarily we can count on maybe in this current economic condition.
But it's something that we could potentially require as a one-time budgetary, fix.
So what I would recommend there then is you make the decision to change policy to a 24%-ish line with the 6% savings. That would get you back up to your 30% policy at the end.
Okay.
Chief, I have another question. Since we have kind of this split on the community service officer, and that's what was presented to us, I'm going to assume that you would prefer to have the versatility of a full officer over a CSO if you had to choose?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely, I would. And I will just add, for every police officer you lose your response and you lose your preparedness to critical incidents. We have a ton of critical incidents here. I didn't want to remind anybody, the Foster case, the manhunt that happened there. Communities across the United States are plagued by gun violence. And the more police officers we have prepared and ready to respond to an incident at a business, at a school, here, we need to be prepared. So that's a long way to answer your question. Absolutely, I need my police officers. Of course, I need my CSOs too. But the list was prepared by me and by my staff, and it wasn't done in a vacuum. We spent a lot of time working on it.
Thank you. Rob?
Yeah, Chief, just to follow up to that. So, like for CSO, for instance, I think it calls it 121,000. Obviously, a good portion of that is benefits. So obviously, if you lose a CSO, the benefits go away. How much does, say, taking away, we'll say all the CSOs, how much would that increase police officer overtime?
I don't think it's going to increase police officer overtime. So you made some comments about our CSOs responding to traffic accidents. Yeah, they will continue to go to traffic accidents. CSOs respond to private property accidents. We just might not respond to accidents at all. If there's no injury, we move vehicles, maybe we do it over the phone. That's a possibility. Our CSOs do so much more than traffic accidents. They support the police officer in many ways. Specifically now, the majority of their time is being used helping our CRT, our community response team. They're picking up garbage. They're supporting the police officers down there with the removal of tents and campsites. But they also do lots of other things like code enforcement. And they are busy. They're the catch-all. But at the end of the day, I stand by my decision. I need to keep this community safe, and I need as many police officers as possible, and I have to look at the priorities of our call volume. And I hope that answered your question for you.
Actually, it was a very in-depth and impressive response, but it doesn't answer my question at all. So obviously, if we had no CSOs to dispatch to any of those scenes, either we've completely ignored the public's request for some kind of help and being able to assess what's needed, or you're going to be sending out a police officer.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about ignoring the community's needs. We will prioritize the community's needs at the time, and that depends on who we have available. Police officers will go to traffic accidents, but they might get there 30 minutes later because they might be handling a domestic, so they might have to clear the domestic and then roll to the traffic accident. For example, I mentioned the Oregon Youth Authority mini riot that happened over the weekend. As our officers responded there was a head-on collision on the parkway. Luckily, we had Oregon State Police that went to that while we managed the critical incident. We're really good at managing incidents. I'm confident we can support the community as best that we possibly can with the resources we have. But when you make cuts, some people might not be happy with the cuts that we have to make, and that could be a service delivery. Not could, it will be a service delivery. And it's my job to look at how can I least impact the service to this community.
All right. Any other questions at the moment? I think that we have gone through the items as they were originally presented. Is that right? And where does that, how much discrepancy does that leave us?
You do have 3 other suggestions that were write-ins underneath police, but I think it's just generic.
Right, I was just wondering what our difference is. Do you have that on the far right, maybe, or far left?
Yeah, so if you removed all of the ones that don't have the majority, you're a little over $2 million. So we need another 400,000.
Okay. So, where is that counting the CSO question?
So it's this column in yellow here. So I have it zeroed out as to not get rid of the CSO because it's split.
Okay. And so council is divided 4-4. I'm going to add the CSO. And so what is that discrepancy? $282,000. Okay. That's where we're at, council, right now, as we talk about how you want to manage that difference. So these other ideas that are added, the first one we touched on briefly, but was to, I think I have the sobering center on here. Is it on just once? Crisis support is on twice on my list for some reason, but, okay, so Brian has suggested trimming back half of what we provide to the sobering center. Does anybody else want to entertain that idea? Not right at the moment anyway. Okay, what is next here? Is it eliminate discretionary funding for city committees?
That is one of them that we haven't gone through yet.
Okay.
I know that number, I think, is closer to $10,000, not 15.
I have a
Okay.
question on that one. Didn't we already say this next year that we're not going to do that? Or is that just my imagination? Because we had a conversation at one point about COPA, and we decided to have them finish up the parking lot and not move forward next year because we didn't have the money of that. So we had that conversation at one point in time. I don't know if anybody else
This
knows
isn't
that.
COPA discretionary money. This is just council-directed discretionary money that you had been giving to COPA last time, but it's not pegged to any one committee.
So it's $15,000 of discretionary funding? Is that?
It's actually 10.
It's 10.
It was just
Okay.
written in as an estimation by Councilor King.
Okay, so the proposal would be to eliminate the $10,000 of council discretionary funding and not have that at all anymore. Okay. Is anybody interested in that or have questions? Dwayne, you're a yes? You want to change it to 10 also, since it's, if it's only 10 in the budget? But it's only 2 people at this time as well, I think. Joel?
Well, I'm the one that put that up there, and it's not that I don't like art, it's just that the priorities with what the other things we're talking about, plus other committees would like to have that as well. And they have very worthy things, whether it's the Parks Committee or the Tree Committee or the Historical Committee. I don't think it's appropriate at this point in time to use discretionary funds for a committee to decide how they want to spend it, given the situation we're in. I don't think it's responsible.
Well, my understanding is that the committee doesn't have 10,000, it's the council that has 10,000 discretionary funds.
Which then I would return to the general fund, given the deficit that we're facing.
Okay. Well, we have 2 people interested in that at the moment. What's the next idea? Is the stop subsidy? Okay. Stop subsidy of electric charging parking spots. The user would pay estimated about $5,000. Is that an accurate estimate? Do we know?
No idea.
Okay, because
we
they're
can look
so
into
new
that,
that
though.
we don't know.
Yeah.
Right, and the dollar amount's pretty low too, so even if we did make that change, we're still well behind.
Okay, Brian?
Oh, that wasn't my suggestion, I think it was Joel's, but I did a quick calculation and it's probably about half of that. Just as an estimate, I think 5,000 is pretty high and I haven't been seeing a ton of use at those stations, so I think it's going to be about half of what is estimated there.
Joel?
So I put that down there, and I have mixed feelings about it. One is, I think it was a former city manager said, you don't want to become so focused on public safety that you mortgage the future of the city, right? And this is actually an enhancement for the downtown to get people that have discretionary spending. They have electric cars. They're not poor. And it gives them a subsidy to fuel their car, but then it's an incentive for the downtown area. And that's not to be minimized. On the other hand, I think it's a not appropriate public policy for those that can afford to fuel their cars that they purchase and have the general fund subsidize that. I don't feel good about that as a statement. as we move forward. And it's not that, so it's against, you know, it's a good enhancement for the downtown area to entice people to go there. We don't want to spend a lot of time on this either way. It's probably irrelevant. On the other hand, for the general fund to pay for somebody that can afford electric car for their fuel, for their car, I don't feel good about.
Brian?
So this isn't a huge sticking point, obviously, but we only do, I think, 3 hours of free parking or charging, and that works out to like $2 per vehicle. So, you know, it's not like we're filling up their gas tank with like $30, $40 of electricity. But that being said, you know, if we want to save $2,500, let's go for it, whatever.
Okay, let's go through the next suggestion is refill part of funding gap with up to $20 a month on water bill, more on large businesses and large NPOs for funding downtown fire, police, and part of community development. And I don't see where this came from, or I guess how much. Joel?
Well, again, you know, I'm probably too active here. This is an iterative process. So if these cuts in your CSOs, if these cuts in your different services are unacceptable to the community, then we need to go to a second step and see what we need to do to resolve that. And that would be this iterative process of bringing in additional funding. There's several businessmen that came to me and said, you know, if I want my CSOs and I want my public art and I want my fireworks, and if I want the swimming pool open, I'm willing to pay for that. But just don't make it too large, and don't have me do it and do it equitably with the large corporations versus the homeowners versus the and I'm getting people that are on fixed incomes calling me saying don't do it at all, and sell off some assets. They want to sell off some assets like Dollar Mountain and use that for operating expenses, and that's not sustainable. So so I think we need to recognize that this is an iterative process. If what we've identified at the end of this process as being socially unacceptable, we need to ask this question.
Valerie?
Yeah, I actually, as I went through this over the weekend, and I did several times, I just literally wanted to cry, because it was just like, how low do we go? I mean, you can look at Portland, you can look at these places, and it's just like, you let go of your police and your fire, and there's no place else to go but down. And I don't want to go there. And having been on this council and having, I feel, talked with the community and said, okay, we could get some money from the people for fuel taxes, and that would help us get our roads better, because you like complaining about the roads, but they didn't want to do that. That was voted down. We tried to raise the levy a dime, and it was voted down. We went out and asked for a fire district to help alleviate it, and they voted it down. We went out and said sales tax. Our county is in desperate condition. And once again, they voted it down. So I feel like I've been on this road down. And I heard several people kind of like what Joel said, put something on the water bill. Every city in this Oregon almost has a public safety fee on their water bill. Now, do I want to put a $27 one on right there? No, I don't want to go there. But I think that's going to rile people up. That's going to get them to a public forum. We can really have a conversation about what we need and where we're at. Because until you do something to rattle their feathers, they're not going to show up. And I'm ready to rattle. I'm ready to say. I spent more time looking at this levy and utility fee matrix every time I went back to it and said, you know, we could put $10 on the water fee, raise $2 million. And if they get rattled, come to us. We'll have a discussion with you. Because you know something? If we don't put out something on the water bill at the end of this levy, we're going to have to put something huge on the water bill. Let them get used to it. Let them get rattled. I mean, that's how I feel. I feel I've been out screaming in this community for years. And Nobody wants to go there. I don't want to get rid of the firefighters. I looked at the code 0 this last week. There was 13 instances this last week where no ambulance was available to take somebody to the hospital. We depend upon our medics. That's who saves the lives until we can get them to the hospital. 13 times in 1 week, and I know that's not uncommon. We probably have a problem with AMR that needs to be addressed, but unfortunately, we can't address that because that's under the county's auspices. So we have a problem, and I listened to the police. I mean, I remember when I went through the sales tax thing, and I know everybody says, oh, it's never going to pass, but it's just like, hey, we need to get the message out, folks. We're in trouble. We're in big trouble. You don't want us to look like Portland? Then do something, and that means give us money so that we can do what we know we need to do. I wouldn't live with my family in this town right now. My kids are grown. They're not coming back. I don't blame them. And that's where I feel, is I want the same quality for the kids that are here now than the kids, my kids, when they grew up here. And so I'm willing to put something on the water bill. And like I said, if we put $10, it got us $2 million. And it's got us to where we could move forward this next year and have the bigger discussion that we need to have. And I would like Scott Stoddard to pay attention, because he's the one who keeps coming up and saying, oh, we need to have that $1.79 levy. No, we need a lot more than a $1.79 levy, because we can't operate and keep our community safe. So I didn't actually put that on there. But I believe strongly that we need to step to the plate and put something on the water bill to get us through and get people talking.
Joel, then Brian.
And again, I think we need to recognize where we're at in the process. This assumes a $1.79 levy, no additional funding. So at the end of the day, you look at what we cut. Does it, first off, mathematically add up to our funding sources, that the assumption of this exercise, which is the $1.79 levy, plus all the property tax and the general fund? If it does, then you look at the cuts in your upper brain and you say, are these cuts what we want the future of the community to be? And if they are, then you go with the cuts. And then there's a price to pay, but it's a reduced service level. When you have less money, you don't have as many services. If that is unacceptable, then you go through a second iteration, which is either raise the levy or put it on the water bill or do something else. So right now, I think we need to recognize where we're at. We're doing an exercise where we looked at a $1.79 levy. That money coming in, balancing to that amount, what would we need to cut? That is good information. And then I need to ask myself, and I'll ask my constituents, and I'd ask my fellow council, and you're already asking yourself, is that acceptable? And if it is, then we go with it. If it's not acceptable, then we look at the funding side. And we also recognize and do it in a sensitive manner so that not any one part of our community bears the burden.
Brian.
I don't know. I'm going to keep it brief. There's a lot of talking today, but just so council knows, if we put a fee on the water bill now or anytime in the near future before we figure out the rest of the funding, the likelihood of a levy passing goes down significantly. So if we put a fee on and then we go back to get a levy renewal, it's more likely that the levy will fail and we will have to replace that with an additional fee. And then we're looking at $60 a month on the water bill. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to be on the council that does that. So we need to think strategically here. We can't just rush into this utility fee. We don't even know what's happening with the water treatment plant. My guess is we're probably going to have to put an additional fee on the water bill for that. So let's try to get through this year first, and then we can work on next year.
I do have a question about that, since I want to keep the two issues a little separate, but that we're looking at $2 million for this coming 24 fiscal year. We've talked about $14.5 million for the future. If we were to not make any of these cuts, would we be looking at 16 and a half into the future? Or would the 14 and a half kind of bring back some of these things if we put them on a freeze for 1 year?
Yeah, the 14 and a half was based on this level of service that we have today.
Today, okay. So some of these things could be temporary if we were successful in getting 14.5 million for
That is correct,
next
but I
year.
would also caution us moving forward to not sprint to add personnel back as well. We have other liabilities out there in infrastructure, equipment replacement, and other things in the general fund that need to be taken care of and looked at strategically as well.
Okay, so I think where we stand right now, we have either a $282,000 gap, or we have a consideration of adding a fee to the utility bill. Are there other ideas that have been suggested that aren't on this main page? Joel?
I just don't want to lose sight, and we won't, because I'll bring it up during agenda review of the software update at the Hillcrest Fire
I think
Station.
that's a totally separate issue, but thank you, we will bring it up later. Okay, so at this point, I guess, especially the bulk of these funds kind of lie in those 3 firefighter positions in the Hillcrest Station. What are council's suggestions for how to make up that difference? We either need to ask staff to find cuts somewhere else, or we need to consider adding a revenue source. Brian?
Well, I don't want to get out in front on this because this is not a popular position, but given the situation, I have to say it. The reason we're in this situation is because of cost overruns, mostly at police, but also at fire. The police budget is double the fire budget. So, this problem really lies mostly within the police division. So my hope is that suggestions for the remainder of those cuts would mostly be coming from the division where the issue stems from, which is police. So that would be my suggestion.
I just want to correct something. We're not talking about cost overruns. We're talking about costs associated with PERS and inflation, et cetera, not projects that we've run over a certain cost. And police is higher than fire because they have a lot more personnel, so their budgets are bigger. But there's not one department that's doing cost overruns over another department. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the cost of providing a quality service and in today's economy.
Sure, I'm sorry that I used the wrong terminology. So at police, expenses are outpacing revenues more so than in any other department on a dollar basis. Is that more accurate?
I would say that in general, all of the general fund and all of the funds, even enterprise funds, revenues are not pacing with expenditures, not specifically police or fire or community development. They all are experiencing the same or similar revenue versus expenditure issues.
Hang on, Val. Are you done with the question? Okay, I think it's Joel, then Valerie. Okay.
Well, and it gets back to the cap on the raise in property taxes versus the rate of inflation and some of the perks, PERS and retirement, that kind of thing. But anyway, earlier, Brian brought it up, and I have mixed feelings about this one as well. There's advantages and disadvantages to it. We have a 30%, between 30 and 40% carryover as our target. We also have a 6% savings that our city manager has put upon each department with the expectation that as an incentive not to frivolously spend their budget and return at least 6% at the end of the year. So in essence, we go from 36 to 46% with that expectation rather than 30 to 40%. And Brian brought up the, appropriately so, he brought up the saying, well, do we want to do that? Now, the only, so there's an advantage there. There's some, I don't know how much money it is, but it's significant. It probably would cover our deficit for sure. The trepidation I have with it, and so I got mixed feelings, is that it's a one-time shot and it doesn't solve future problems. And the level of service is the only thing that will solve future problems or an increase in funding. So we can put that on as a Band-Aid, and then next year we're going to talk about it at the same, and that money will be spent. Or we can reduce our level of services by cutting and keep with our same revenue stream, or we can keep our level of service the same as what it is today and increase our revenue stream. But there is that option, and I think it needs some discussion, and the trepidation is it's just a one-time fix, and once it's gone, it's gone.
I have a question about that. Or were you going to say something?
I just looked up the number really quick of what 6% savings is. It's a little bit over $2 million.
And JC and I have talked about this 6%. I'm a little concerned about you saying this 6% is almost like, in some people's minds, maybe a guarantee that we're going to do. We've talked about, we don't think it's very likely at all that we're going to be able to return those kind of savings if inflation is still at 8+%. And our revenues are still at 3%. To get to that 6% savings will be extremely difficult. So if we're putting that into the calculations, I think that's setting us up for failure, not success in meeting that.
I have a question about the carryover, because I talked to Tom Bradbeer on Friday, and he indicated that he believes that's a very high percentage of carryover compared to what most cities would do, or the idea of the reserve, and also that the way that we budget it, I guess I had been thinking of it more of a savings account, that once we dip below 30%, it'd be hard to build it back up, but apparently it's more of a revolving fund each year. Anyway, he had a suggestion of ratcheting it down slightly. So can you explain more about that?
Hopefully I can touch on all the points that you brought up there. So yeah, 30% may be high in comparison to other cities around the state. However, I think Ashland's like at 25. I think Corvallis is 20. And so you're not far off. When you read the budget book when I first came on here.
That's huge, I would say, the difference between 20 and 30.
Well, Albany's is 5%. So it can range through what the level of council would like to have as that savings. So when you read the budget book, and when I came on here about 11 months ago, the 30% history is to allow for those property taxes to come in November and allow for you to operate on that fund balance between July and November. And so, because you're not getting any revenue in the general fund, I mean, you're getting a little bit, but not the big wave that we see in November with property taxes. So that's the reason for the cushion. Gosh, what were some of the other points there? There are a few.
I guess, well, you addressed the idea of it being high. I guess the idea of ratcheting it down rather than just, dropping it quickly, but making a plan to, if we wanted to move it to say 25 or something, to do that incrementally.
You could make that policy decision. The problem is moving it down, it's hard to put it back. So if you're going to move it down, it's kind of like credit card debt. In order to pay it back, you got to work twice as hard. And so in the current state of the general fund, it's going to be hard. And I know a lot of cities through the 2008 period lowered theirs, and they never made it back to their original policy.
Joel, then Valerie.
So then the other thing that strikes me is if you have less than 30% and you're past the end of the fiscal year before the taxes come in, and is there a danger then of running out of your balance? Even though you got the money coming in, your balance would be wouldn't be there. So then the options are to borrow to cover the shortfall?
So different cities operate differently. Some cities actually allow their general fund to go negative before November. Now, financial reporting wise, we just recognize what we have at June 30th. Now, financially, me and Irv have talked about this going negative, and it's something we probably don't want to entertain.
And if you don't have that policy to go negative, you don't have enough, then normally cities will do an interfund loan, or maybe we'll take money from somewhere,
Water.
some fleet or enterprise, and we'll be borrowing the money to keep us through until we get taxes to then pay that back. So it's an additional cost to operate if you don't have a strong enough reserve balance.
Valerie?
Yeah, which kind of brings me back a little bit to what I think one of the biggest things that when we went to tried to get the sales tax was to build stability in our system. And that's what we don't have right now because everything is dependent upon property taxes. So if you had a fee on the water bill, that would help stabilize to where that wouldn't be as necessary because there would be a fund source that came through as well. Kind of like when we talk about putting money in the water bill, that's when we get nonprofits. We don't get nonprofits to pay because nonprofits don't pay property tax. Less than 9% of the property in Josephine County is even fully taxable. So we lose a lot of money that we could get by putting money on the water bill. And I know, we're concerned about our water rates. I'm as concerned as anybody else is. I'll continue to work to try to get the water bill lowered going forward. But I think that's what we're really talking about is stability. And I will also, because I also talked with Tom Bradbeer, and that's why last week I brought up the 28%, because it was just like, we are higher than most cities. That's a fact. And even going 28% would give us some money. It would give us the 3 firefighters. I mean, just going to 28% would make a difference. And so that's why I brought that up last time, because nobody wants to slip and fall further behind. But there are 2 things we're talking about here. Number one, we're talking about a system of dependence upon property tax. And that's part of our problem, is we are dependent upon property tax. We need to broaden our base. And that's why I've also think that the community needs to understand that. And that's why, like I said, I'm ready to rattle everybody to bring them down to City Hall so we can really have a conversation, because that's what does it, is when they get rattled. So I am in favor of going down to 27, 28%, if that helps us keep that small amount that we have not found a solution for.
Brian, then Dwayne.
We are 90% of the way there with the exercise. We've identified 90% of the cuts that we need to identify fairly quickly. My suggestion would be to ask the city manager to find additional suggestions for the remainder of the amount, and probably an amount that exceeds that, so that there's a little bit of wiggle room with council's decision, and then get the budget balanced for this year.
Dwayne?
Yeah, I've been quiet for quite some time now, so I guess it's time for me to talk. I think we need to look at some property sales, which we've already talked about past couple months. Not saying I agree with everybody's property they want to sell, but we've already talked about them. I don't know why it's taking so long for us to vote on them and say this one needs to go. And I brought this up to the city manager, and I've been shot down, but I think people need to know that they're getting the best for their buck. I think, are we outsourcing as much as we can? And I brought this up to Aaron. He said, we are. Like the city parks, can we outsource that to someone else to mow the lawns cheaper? Have we done an RFP and gotten 4 bids, and I could see that we're making the best? I mean, because people need to see that we're doing the best for their money. But just by saying it, I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if they're getting the best for their buck, for their money. Can we get some mowing service? Or do I just take staff's word for it? I'm not saying either one's a liar, but I'd like to show that the citizens, yes, they are getting the best money for the amount of taxes they're paying. I'm not for the water bill. I've already made that very clear right now. I'm not for that. It's not that I can't pay. I don't really care. I can pay. But it's not about me. It's about everybody else that lives in the city here. And I agree with Brian here. We need to send this back to the city manager and find the other money somehow. So those are my thoughts.
Rob?
Yeah, I definitely appreciate everything that was said today by the counselors, because it's all got validity for sure. Do we have updated what all the counselors, and my question is me adding a vote to any one of those categories going to give us to a fifth on any of those?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay.
I think the only thing we were 4 and 4 on was the CSO.
Okay.
And I did not have you, I guess I had you, would be a keep the CSO as the side that you landed on there.
Sure. Yeah, I'm going to stay on that side.
Okay. So we have 2 suggestions right now for asking the manager to identify different cuts to make up the gap. We've had some discussion on adding a utility fee, as well as some discussion about changing the reserve policy. But kind of hearing like 2 people speak out for about each one of those ideas. So, DJ?
Yeah, my budget's balanced here. I held the line. We asked, what can we do to make ends meet? And the respective experts in the departments showed us a way to do it. And I'm actually pleased that we got so close. But where I'm standing on this is, at this point in time, I'm a hard no on revenue sources. And it seems obvious to me that we need another few $100,000. And let's just redo this exercise, back to the drawing board, see if you can find those cuts. So no on revenues, yes on back to the drawing board for that final 10%.
Okay, we have 3 people that have now spoken up in favor of having the manager look for others. Oh, Vanessa, your turn, sorry.
That's okay. I did want to say, Councillor Juncker, if anyone wants us to prove that we're doing the best with the funds that we have, please remind them our public safety has been operating on the same levy amount for 15 years. And we are operating under a frozen tax amount from the 80s. So I think all things considered there, I think we're doing pretty fair. I don't know anyone else that's operated on the same income for 15 years with the way the economy is going. I'm also not in favor of any revenue increases at this time. I think this is really just a balancing exercise. It's not a time to raise revenue. And I do support also moving back to the city manager for some additional suggestions. Is it 282 that's left, JC? Okay, thank you.
All right, we're up to 4. Rob?
So just a quick question, and you might be able to answer it off the top of your head, JC. So is the city of Medford, because I know we had examples of different fees on utility bills that you provided, I guess, for 4 or 5 cities around here. But the city of Medford, their base tax rate, is it about $1 more than Grants Pass? It's in the 5-something range, I think.
I don't remember their exact permanent rate.
But that would definitely be a figure that would be good for the public and also the council to know for perspective. But I think that we are about $1 less on our base tax rate than Medford. But I'd like to know that at some point. Thank you.
Valerie?
I was just going to say at least $1. It is.
All right, so.
And they also have a public safety fee on their water bill that's raising.
In terms of the timeline for preparing this budget for the budget committee in May, I think at this point, like, would we just need to have the 282 presented as part of the budget season in order, like, kind of authorize you to move forward based on what we've done today and present those other changes as part of the budget?
Maybe Aaron wants to answer some of this. We are on a short timeline. We're 2 weeks away from our potential first budget meeting. So to reconvene is going to push that schedule back quite considerably.
Yeah, I would not be in favor of having the discussion of level of service in the budget committee meetings. They're for allocation of resources. If council desires for the city manager to bring back an alternative for the $200,000, we'll do that. The timing, though, is a real issue. And then the other thing is, in looking at the three departments, I'm not sure if council has an idea of, is there certain departments or level of service that you're wanting to change above and beyond what we show? That would help provide us additional direction. If not, I'll come up with something that has the least impact to the organization and the level of service for the community as best we can. We hit that with the recommendation that we had in front of you, so it may be deeper in one department versus the other. But I would say that we would try to come back with something, because we need to do the budget as soon as possible. And I can get you what that would look like in a memo and go from there. I'm not sure, we might even, we're gonna have to look at the dates. We might have to push the meetings back another week or two also to meet this time frame.
What is the total amount of the general fund again?
True. So after our $2.4 million reduction of the staff recommended, that would have been the total budget around $35 million for the general fund.
And also Medford's permanent property tax rate is 5.29 per thousand.
Okay, so we have a $35 million general fund, and we've got a $282,000 gap here that I would say that's not very much. If staff wanted to just direct, whatever that comes to, I could figure it out, but 1% across the board to each department or whatever to make that cut.
Yeah, I mean, if we were provided that authority, that'd be awesome, and we'll just try to make it happen so we can meet the budget and move forward. If there's anything drastic in level of service, then I'd be providing you that notification.
We just need to get this show on the road for, this is, impacting our budget that's starting in June. Joel?
Congress does that all the time. Only usually it's about a 6% across the board cut.
However you'd like it. Brian?
Yeah, that works for me.
DJ saying no?
No, I'm firmly in the category of reduction of level of service here. I think across the board cut, I think, is not a good budgetary practice. I think we can get there from here. This is not an insurmountable impasse that we have. I'm certain that there's $300,000 we can find in the level of service, and I think we can find it in public safety, because that is where the issue is at this point.
So you would direct it to the 282 to come out of public safety? Okay, so that would be another suggestion. Vanessa?
I second that.
Okay. Okay, who's on board with doing the 282 out of public safety? Is that a question, Joel?
I disagree with that, because to put constraints on it at this point in time with our knowledge can limit viable options. And some of it's going to obviously have to come out of public safety, but to say that we have that wisdom and that knowledge at this point in time for 100% of those extra cuts, I don't think I want to limit the range of alternatives that they can look at. Because there's, and as much as I like all the other departments, like the parks, the parks department's got a significant budget. The other ones have significant budgets, and to have this body say, just look at this one department, and given what we have already said, and they're aware of that, but I don't want to limit their range of alternatives.
Vanessa?
I just want to be clear, Councillor King, I'm not saying that haphazardly. I'm saying that after spending almost all weekend studying the general fund and the expenditures and revenues.
Okay. Rick?
I'm against it taking the 282 out of public safety. I feel that's short-sighted. And if you look at the three-legged stool, you hamper and cause public safety to have not be able to provide the services, and the other departments in this town will never see the growth and the beauty that we enjoy in our town. So would not want to see the 282 out of public safety. Thank you.
Rob, then Dwayne?
Yeah, I would agree. I'd rather see the 6% come from across the board.
So if I can interrupt really quick, just to throw out all ideas, make sure everybody's on the same page. If we leave the 282 in there, you're at 29.04% in the general fund. You're at 29.04%.
Dwayne?
I'm not for taking it out of one public safety, so I would throw it back and say, find it somewhere else or spread it out, because I don't see cuts from other departments as much as public safety takes. And due to the crisis we have going on in our streets and the amount of emails and everything we get, I think we need more of them than we think we do. And so I'm not for cutting out of the public safety right now.
Valerie?
Yeah, I'm going to go with what he just said. 29%, going from 30% to 29% on the, would do it for us. So I guess I don't get, when we are so much higher than everybody else, why going down 1 percentage point is going to really kill us. To me, it makes logical sense. And I heard that from Tom Bradbeer, who's on the budget committee. I've heard it from our financial advisor. That was one of the suggestions in the very beginning. So I just think that makes sense to me. It's just to go to 29% and call it good.
All right. Hang on. At this stage, we have 5 who have spoken out against having the 282,000 come from public safety. So we need to find another solution. Valerie has spoken up for changing the reserve policy to 29%. And DJ, you had your hand up.
Yeah, in response to that, Val, I mean, it's very tempting to do that, but we currently have a level of service in this community that is not paid for by this community. Our general fund is waned to nothing. We've tapped out the ability of the levy. We're going to have this conversation in the future, and we're essentially running on credit. We can no longer do that. And we cannot continue to move backwards, and backing off of our budgetary parameters will get us deeper in the hole, in my opinion, into a place that's going to be near impossible to recover from. So I'm a hard line on our budgetary parameters, given the information on how we've been paying for public safety heretofore.
Brian?
I would expand on my openness to either having the cuts come from where the city manager feels they are most appropriate, or have them be across the board cuts. So either way, I want the budget to be balanced from a reduction.
Okay, so in terms of either having city manager identify cuts or across the board, I think I've got Rob, Brian, Dwayne, DJ, and Vanessa. Is that fair? That was 5. Rob, Brian, Dwayne, DJ, Vanessa. All right, I think that's where we're at. So I guess the question is how does that get presented back? I know we're on a short timeline here, and I don't know what your requirements are for the budget season, but next Monday is May 1st, and we've already canceled next week's budget committee meeting. So where does that leave us?
Unknown at this point. We'd have to see what that across the board cut would look like. As we start looking at some of this, we may push the 9th back another week to give us time to do what needs to be done and looked at. I don't know if Aaron has anything else to say on that.
Yeah, I don't, unless the recommendation is that it is just have the city manager make up the 282, and then we'll just plan for the budget, or if it's to have the city manager make a recommendation for the 282 and it comes back to you on a matrix process again.
I don't know. I mean, my preference would absolutely be to just have you take care of it and put it in the budget and have it move forward. I think that that's, probably going to be negligible in terms of the big picture, but not my call. DJ?
Sure, that's in the purview of council to do so. It is our elected duty to establish the level of service based on the budget. It is not the budget committee's job to do that. It is not the city manager's job to do that. That is our described job. That's what we're elected to do. Therefore, I'm going to hold the line on council approval on the budget cut.
Okay, so you want to see it again, like in this form next Monday? Okay, who is in support of doing it that way? All right, that will be the plan.
Thank you very much for that lively discussion and additional direction that we got today. Greatly appreciate it.
All right, how about a welcome center remodel? All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I was actually having a hard time. I keep getting distracted by that cake that's sitting in front of DJ. It looks pretty tasty. So subject in summary is just we're here before you to kind of get final direction on the Welcome Center remodel. The relationship to your council goals is to maintain, operate, and expand our infrastructure, and this is to plan and develop infrastructure. Very, very short background. This has been one of your priority projects for several years. We have presented several options both to Historic Buildings and Sites Commission and to you as the City Council. Initially, general direction was given for alternative 4 with the potential to put in some garage doors and provide for some enhanced throw through the building for events like First Friday and others. And then we did provide some initial artist concepts of those doors, and we were then asked by council for some additional modifications and to come back before you with some different style. So the architect, I think, listened to your meeting. I believe he has really kind of captured the spirit of what you were asking for. And so what we have before you are just a couple of drawings that we would like to get your feedback on, and hopefully authorization to move forward with completing design so that we can get complete costs and bid documents available. So this is one of the options with a green and kind of cream color trim. What it would look like from the back with the 3 external restrooms. We actually have worked with the architect. I want to make one little highlight here because it is subtly different, that this awning would actually wrap all the way around, so you wouldn't have one little separate awning that kind of sticks out here. It will actually make the covered space more usable for events at the Welcome Center with very little additional cost. Same thing in kind of a gray and a red color, and if you look, all of these have, this one has almost no brick option. This will be the lower cost of the versions. This one has still a little bit of a brick facade work to it in the gray and white. And then the last is kind of what they called, I believe it's called a colonial white, even though it looks a little gray-ish. It's just kind of an off-white. All of these match the downtown color palette. And then lastly, a rough layout of what the potential new landscaping option would look like with the patio that is redone. And Councilor De La Grange did make a good note. We do have to do something with that patio one way or the other, whether it's this option or something else. If you're going to increase traffic around the Welcome Center, we need to fix the patio. So next steps is we would, if pending council direction, we would complete the final design and specifications so that we can get a final cost for the project. We would then begin the planning and permitting process, and that includes the Historical Buildings and Sites Commission full review. We would then solicit bids for council consideration on this project. We're actually thinking of it being bid with what we would call deductive bid items so that we could take it in pieces, the landscaping being an independent piece, the patio being an independent piece, and then the remodel itself, the exterior remodel being a separate piece. That way, as budget allows, we can do the key pieces and do the rest at a later date. We would then begin construction, and hopefully construction could be completed by next, not this coming tourist season, but by the following tourist season. Potential project costs. Total costs now are looking at about $630,000. The upgrade of the existing patio, the landscape architect recommended, or it estimated between $84,000 and $104,000. The external building costs are estimated at $200,000. I will say, in looking through the detailed cost estimate this morning, I think that there was $20,000, like they had a job trailer there. I would guess that this would be a local contractor and they won't mobilize a job trailer for this job, so there's some costs that are in there that are high. In addition, the internal remodel, and this is on the high side, was going to be close to $250,000, and then engineering and inspection permits. So this project is funded out of LB 6314, which currently has a balance of about $580,000, but you have already allocated $136,000 of that for installation of the Portland Lu's. So there's about $444,000 remaining, which was why I said we would probably want to bid this in a phased approach to where we could take pieces of it and get it done as the budget allows, or consider alternatives. So I did want to put a couple of value engineering potentials out in front of you. We could eliminate the patio with pavers and consider the installation of asphalt. We could also reduce the amount of the potential landscape improvements. Also replacing the existing siding as is. Don't add any doors, just basically take off what's there and put it back in with a similar color palette, or reduce the number of exterior restrooms. All of these are ideas that you could consider to save cost. At this point, we are looking for direction to move the project forward, and I do have some options there, and otherwise I would love to answer questions and get direction.
Thank you. Questions, Rick?
Thank you, Jason. So do we have any figures from past or present what the restroom use would be? If we were to eliminate one restroom, would the other two remaining be adequate?
I would guess so. I mean, 2 is more than there is currently open to the, general public. Right now they have to come in and get a key and access it, and there's not that much access. I'm kind of looking to get, how many people are accessing a lot? A lot. So eliminating 1 would reduce that, correct, yeah.
Okay, and second and last question. Would pouring concrete and doing a stamped patio be less expensive than the pavers? And would that make it feasible?
So that might actually be as much or more than pavers. When I was value engineering, I was actually saying asphalt, like you would just put it more like parking lot material. Stamped concrete would probably drive that cost up quite a bit.
Thank you.
Dwayne?
I just have a question, because I wasn't around when this was all being voted on. Where's this dollars coming from, so you can explain it to me?
So this is a combination of both TLT dollars, so the transient lodging tax, and urban renewal dollars that are paying for this currently.
Valerie?
So the tourism, it comes out of, what's that category that it comes out of? There's a special...
Facilities.
Facilities, okay. So we annually get facilities money, correct, from the TLT? So that grows a little bit. About how much does it grow, say, per year? Or how much has it grown in the last few years? Just out of curiosity. Okay.
I'm glad he's here.
He's going to look it up. It'll take a minute. Anything else? Joel?
Well, just to be clear for both the council and the public then, the LB dollars are not general fund dollars that we were talking about in the last discussion.
I don't believe there were, I can't swear to that, Councilor King, but I don't believe there are very many general fund dollars in this project. I believe it is all TLT dollars and the urban renewal dollars.
I'd like to know.
Yeah, I'd have to pull the capital project and look at it up.
Okay, thank
for
you.
JC's going to look up some financial
I was
info
going to say,
too.
I just didn't want to say off the top of my head that it had 0 in it because it may have a few.
Do we have other questions? I have a question about the design. If you could just quickly show us again, what are the differences between these three
Great questions.
schematics?
So primarily color. They tend to follow all of the same motif. They maintained the front look of the building with the 4 pillars in the front on the main entryway. They all added a set of another entryway on the south facing G Street, but it's kind of tucked back in. They all will add patio that'll kind of wrap all the way around the building so that as you do have events in there, they can spill out onto the sidewalk and people are not walking in the landscaping. The fundamental difference is this option does not have any brick facade on the building as the other ones do. So, right
see
here.
brick
So
on the
yellow
gray.
and or on the gray and kind of red color, you can see that there's like a brick wainscoting down low, as well as running up the side of the corners of the building, kind of just framing the structure. But otherwise, they're all pretty much the same.
Okay, so as far as choosing one of these over the other, we're choosing color and brick or no brick.
Kind of, yeah, and and no brick on this option as well. It really is kind of a color preference, and then whether or not we want to have the brick facade, which would accent those other buildings in the downtown area.
Okay. Question, Rick?
Before we make a total final decision, I guess on the brick or no brick design, I think the Historic Site Building Committee, I would like to hear from them, and if they have, I realize there's a price tag associated with that, but I think that could be, I don't want to see them being totally hand-tied, but be able to provide us some input.
Yeah, what you have now is exactly like this without the brick. So you'd be kind of matching, if you chose one of the options without the brick, you would be essentially matching what you have today, but we would be glad to take it to them. We thought we would wait and get your final approval first, so that we're not going to them, coming back, then going and getting final design, and then going back to them again.
DJ?
Sure, kind of building on that inquiry. When we had talked about this and then redesigned, the goal at the time, if I recall correctly, was to have this project completed for this year's tourism season. Is it fair to presume that that's not happening?
There's no way we can get this done in that time frame.
I knew that, but we needed to just kind of establish that. And then given that we have a timeline, it seems like we do have time to mill this around a little bit prior to, like, official committee action. But this is smack dab in the historic district, and so I could get behind that.
Vanessa?
I'm sorry, Jason, I stepped away for a moment. Did you say something has to be done with that back patio area due to the buckling?
Absolutely, yeah. There's no way that if we go and do all of these improvements, one way or another, we're going to have to do something, whether it's to take all that out and just repave it, or put back in new pavers, or as Councilor Riker suggested, maybe even look at stamped concrete, something absolutely. It's so uneven back there, we're going to have to take care of that, even maybe if we don't even do the remodel.
Is there something that could be done in the interim that's less permanent than asphalt, but isn't brick? So maybe we could kind of stagger this development?
That's a great question. I'd have to reach out to our landscape architect. You're kind of in that area, like if we don't put brick pavers back down, we can't just put in gravel, especially because we have a vehicle that accesses that and parks there every year to sell See's candy. But we could look at more of an earth finish. I'd be worried also about dirt and mud over time, and I think we'd have to do something. Maybe not asphalt, but concrete might be a way. Maybe it's not stamped concrete. Maybe it's just concrete like sidewalk concrete.
Okay, thank you.
Joel, then Brian?
So I sent the briefing paper and got some informal feedback from the commission, and they're okay with it. They want to stay within budget. One comment was bathroom-wise, right now, I think we got the outhouse, the portable outhouse, and it really doesn't fit in with the decor of a historical downtown. Well, I guess it does if you're out camping in a Forest Service campground or something. And that perhaps in the interim, and I don't know if we want to consider this or not, that we put one of the Portland loos there rather than down at Baker Park. So that's just something for consideration.
Jason?
If I could, the Portland loos will be getting installed here shortly. I'm expecting the contractor to start any day, and that's one is actually going to be just kind of catty corner over in the Beaver lot. So that's pretty close to this, which might mean we could remove the porta potty from this location. I actually thought we had removed it from this location. Is it still there?
Yes. Oh,
It's still the porta potty?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I thought we had removed the porta potty from this location and moved it elsewhere, but.
And I think the lines will be reduced once we put the bathrooms in, so.
Yep.
Brian?
Hey, Jason, thank you. I just had a question about the patio area.
Yeah.
I know in the summer, that's going to be really hot out there because I didn't see really there was hardly any tree cover. And if we have like asphalt, it's going to be black and it's just going to be, not habitable or hospitable in any way. So is there any way for us to have like a lighter colored ground or some plan for either more trees or shade sails or something so that area in tourist season is actually more usable?
So we can look at all of those things. I just want to caution you, our budget is already, I think, over what we have available. But we can look at, I think, sails, or we can look at additional tree planting. You're also running out of planter areas if we look at the areas that we have available to plant as well. So it's going to be a challenge to do all of those. I would think if we want to add a shaded area back there, looking at some kind of superstructure and sails, I think is a great concept. I just wonder if we want to phase that in a much later phase.
Okay, thanks.
Rob?
So, we've heard a lot about, tree canopy cover on parking lots that we're essentially forcing developers to put in. I just don't see any shade trees in any of these that have been planted, and I'm not sure why.
I think that we will have as many or more shade trees as was there currently with the planting.
So
proposed.
part of the concern that Brian was having would maybe be would be covered in a sufficient number of years as the trees go larger. It's just not depicted on this drawing, right?
Well, given that this is an architectural drawing, right, they've just plugged in some clip art trees. I don't think we're married to the trees that we're seeing here in this picture, right?
No, this is very, very preliminary. We haven't done design. I will make a note to ensure that we comply with code and try to provide more additional shade for
And that might
future.
cover Brian's concern about being more hospitable back there, cooler at some point in the future, yeah.
And unfortunately, we're going to have to remove a bunch of very mature trees to complete this project. So that's unfortunate, but we will be replacing them all. So.
JC is ready with some financial info.
So of your transient lodging tax, the amount that is apportioned to tourism facilities, we obviously had a rate change here recently from 9 to 12%, so these numbers are going to jump. So in 2021, you're looking at about $266,000 that went towards facilities, and then currently you're in about the $350,000 range.
So that's how much is coming in per year, is approximately 350?
Per year, because it is by Muni code designated to tourism-related facilities.
And what other facilities are included in that?
Yeah, it's more to the parks facilities. I think we even did a better job this year in the LB projects of defining which facilities in parks. And so it's the large parks that we consider as far as our tourism facilities. And we kind of crossed off some of the smaller parks as part of being eligible for those.
So of that 350 per year, is that flexible, or is it already kind of pre-designated to go to certain places?
I think that's flexible, and community development looks at their projects and tries to determine the best use of those funds.
Okay, so it's unallocated but needed to be used for tourism facilities.
Well, unallocated is probably not the right word. It is allocated for 24, and I think CD has already done that through their budgeting process. But in future, you could potentially require that of them.
I'm just getting at, it's not like we expect that 200,000 of that is going to go towards maintaining Riverside Park. It's flexible at council discretion going forward, to get at Councilor Younker's question. Okay, so that's where the money would primarily be coming from.
And the second question, the money that is funding this project is about $500,000 of urban renewal money. There was some tourism dollars, about $350,000, some small interest at about $5,000, and then there was some general fund policy and legislation allocation of $50,000.
All right, any other questions? Joel?
So do we need that 50,000 from the general fund for this? We do? How come?
It's already short of the project.
Yeah, right now, we have more project than funds.
Well, I understand that.
Yeah,
Is
but,
$50,000 going to make a significant difference versus the other thing we talked about this morning?
I mean, if you want to relate them, potentially, you could give those funds back to the general fund. There's also some dollars in LB00 that you guys decided not to allocate to any project that is unrestricted as well. And that's about $200,000. So if you want to start going down that rabbit hole, there's some other funds there too, if you just want to one time give money back to the general fund.
All right, David, keep it down. Dwayne?
Well, that sounds like $250,000. We only need, what, $32,000 more? I would be in favor of that right now.
Rob?
So all these different options, Jason, is there much cost difference between them?
Yeah, the only one that
I'm talking about the building itself, not the landscape.
No, absolutely. The only one I think might cost a little bit more is this one, and that's because it's adding that brick wainscoting. And so there will be additional cost in putting up the brickwork, even though it's fake brickwork, it still costs a little bit more. The others are all just your traditional kind of lap siding. Those will probably be the lower cost options.
Well, I'd be in favor of just, because it's going to HBSC in any event, I'd be in favor of just giving them the options and having them give us our recommendation. Since we're considering doing the rest of it, the back area, possibly incrementally, as Jason suggested, I'd just be in favor of handing this off to the HBSC and see what they come up with and move it forward. To me, they're all close, they're very similar to my eye, to my non-aesthetically sensitive eye. They're all pretty close to each other. I would just as soon give it to HBSC and call it good.
Do people still have questions? Are you moving into discussion? Questions? Questions? Okay. Brian, then Joel.
I was just going to make a suggestion from my point of view for the color. I might have a slightly more aesthetically trained eye than Rob, but I would prefer the off-white option.
That's the one that's on the screen?
No, it's that one.
This one.
Oh, okay, the whiter. Okay, Joel?
So I don't want to lose track of the general fund discussion. With the flick of a pen, you can cut that deficit by 35,000 or whatever it was and we have the alternative fund available, so let's do it.
All right, let's try to have one discussion at a time, if we can. For the purposes of this building, we've had several people suggest sending it back to HBSC, all three options, getting their feedback. Do we want to do that? Do you want to move, pick a design and send that to them for their feedback? What other questions would we need to just facilitate this moving forward, Jason?
I guess from my perspective, if you're good sending it to HBSC and HBSC says option number 3, you guys are good with us running with that, finalizing the design and making it go. That's what I would be looking for at this point.
Right, otherwise it's going to need to go to HBSC and then
And
come
then
back
come
to
back
us.
to you again, correct.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's what I'm concerned about. Okay, we'll come back to your topic, Joel, but let's get through this one at the moment. We've got a whole bunch of hands. Valerie, did you have a hand, Vanessa?
Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah.
Brian, and then over here, DJ.
I was going to say, after the discussions we had previously, I talked to many people, and the people that I talked with the Tourism Advisory Committee would prefer to have the one similar, the first one, which is the green, because it ties in more with the bricks and what have you downtown. So they were against white because they thought it would stand out. They were not in favor of the white colonial one that the HBSC first time recommended because they felt it stood out and they wanted it to be more part of downtown. So in talking with the Tourism Advisory Committee, that was their feedback that I got at the time. So I'll leave it at that.
Vanessa.
I did just want to say really quickly, I can't be the only one up here that feels a little jarred moving from our previous discussion to this discussion. It kind of feels like we're rearranging the furniture on the Titanic. But I do feel like it's really important to say that communities have to balance economic development and public safety. They both have a really crucial staple in healthy communities. If we don't invest in what draws people here, which is tourism, we will lose that draw. So I'm sure I'm not the only one that's feeling a little jarred having this conversation today, but that doesn't negate its importance at all. With that being said, I do like the cream and the forest green. And I think it kind of sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, but it kind of sounds like we have to choose between amenities because the project is over cost, so we kind of, is that
No, we
correct?
don't at this point. I think what I would recommend is if council chooses and you like the concept of redoing the patio in this, we would bid the project out, but with what we call a deductive bid item. So the contractor would provide us with pricing for all of them, and then we would only fund what we can afford. And then we would know what that other piece is going to cost us. We then save that component of the project and rebid it at a later date.
Okay, and that does feel more appropriate to make the decision with the way cost escalations are occurring.
Yeah, they're
Okay.
just so volatile right now, it's really hard to predict.
Sure, okay, all right. I support moving that cream colored with the forest trim, that one to the HBSC, that design.
Brian, then DJ. DJ.
I want to know what they think about the historic character. I don't expect them to opine on budgetary considerations, but I would like them to understand. If they had a preference, that'd be great. Let us know what you think about all of them, but just be very clear. My attitude about this welcome center is slap a coat of paint on it, make it look nice. It has to pop. I don't think we have to reinvent this entire structure. We can make it look good and we can pull this off without all the expensive stuff that we don't necessarily have to pay for. So, yep, that's where I'm at.
Okay, I guess I'm not sure. Are you all in support of sending it forward to the HBSC or of making this decision at the council level now? HBSC, yes.
Well, I think HSBC as well as the tourism, personally, if you give them to one, give it to the other, two committees.
Okay, there was support for HBSC. Is there support for also forwarding it to tourism and getting their feedback? Yes, okay. So we'll send that to those two committees and get their feedback in terms of color and the brickwork. In terms of the budget, does that need to wait now?
No, as long as council's comfortable with it, whatever those two committees have chosen jointly, that we go ahead and move forward with the design and get it ready to bid. If you guys are comfortable with that, because you're good with any of these three, that's what staff would propose that we do, so that we can keep the project moving, as opposed to coming back to you and going, well, they chose this one.
So his proposal is that it not come back to us. Is that okay?
So, Sarah.
Yes, Joel.
So there is disagreement between those two committees on color, and there's disagreement up here between the councilors on color. The historic color was white, and the tourist people want green. And there were strong feelings on the commission, if I remember right, Rob, you may correct me if I'm wrong, that it was originally a bank building and it was white and it was part of the history. So I don't know how we want to resolve that conflict. We need to do it in an open and fair manner. But there is that conflict, and to just send it to both committees, if that's what you really want to do, I'm not sure that's going to resolve that conflict.
Brian.
Well, based on what Joel just said, sounds like HPSC is probably going to want white and tourism is probably going to want green. So we can just save we can save ourselves a bunch of time, and we can just,
choose,
get a majority here on a color right now.
Rob.
Yeah, I'm just not sure that HPSC actually ever had their own preference on this. They had a preference, we had a preference when the options were presented by Dave Reeves. And of those options, yes, they chose one. I don't know that they necessarily liked any of them. I think that these are all more within, they're all much more similar to each other than the original 7, I think, that went to HPSC. So I don't know that they necessarily are against or for anything. I know that they would, I'm going to say that any one of these they would be much more accepting of than the original 7 that they were delegated. So I don't know, where to go with it, and I don't know that they may go for the green. I have no idea, but they originally. But again, what do we do if they disagree? I mean, is it really that important?
At this stage, Jason, what do we need to do we're going to put it out for an RFP for the, or just a bid for the actual building of it?
Once we have the final design, we'll have to complete the design drawings and come up with a bid specification. Then we would be putting that out to the market for construction. And that construction would probably be slated for probably next fall would be the target, so that we could get that construction completed over the winter and have it 100% done by next tourism season.
I think you mean this fall, this year, 24?
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay.
Upcoming
be
fall,
ready
this
for
upcoming
summer,
fall.
or
Yes,
fall
at
of
the end of-
23,
summer.
so it'd be ready for summer of 24.
Yep.
Okay, I guess just in terms of what decision council actually needs to make so that you can move forward on getting the building work going, we can send this to the two committees, get their feedback. Do you need the council to sign off on something at a business meeting aside from
If they're
color?
in agreement at that point, I would not need anything, unless the architect comes back and they need, $100,000 to complete the plans, but we don't believe that they will. We believe that that'll be within Aaron's signing authority. Our intent would be just to move that forward, get those bid-ready documents, and then it'll be back in front of you, of course, at award time, because we've already established that it's over our signing authority to move forward.
Okay, so I think we need to move forward on
Great.
getting the building part going. We'll have the two committees take a look at it, and then we'll put it on a business meeting to have council give the final vote on the color. How's that? All right. All right. Well, that comes from different money, just like, all right, David, out. Just to be clear to the public, our capital expenses do come from different pools of money than operating expenses, and we have tourism lodging tax dollars that can only be spent on tourism facilities, and that is where a good chunk of this money would come from, in addition to the urban renewal. So,
We need
Joel.
to follow up just real briefly. I don't think it's a big deal on the funding thing, Sarah.
yep. So you want to have a discussion about general fund monies being used for that particular project?
Yeah, I just think we need to do a flick of the pen and put that money back in the general fund that would be used to support that and go from the, what is it, the 000, whatever that is? Yeah, LB 000 and call it good.
Okay. So there's 50,000, let's see, just, can you clarify for us again, JC, what these general fund dollars that we're talking about?
So there's 50,000 from general fund money that was given to the Welcome Center project, and the Portland Loo is also out of that same project, correct? That potentially is unrestricted, and you can give it back to the general fund. There's also interest earnings in LB 00, where we brought a few weeks back the discussion of the $200,000 and where to allocate that. And at that time, council said to not pursue any of those ideas and projects. And so that, again, is unrestricted because interest is unrestricted.
Okay. Question, Rick?
Will the bid coming back from the construction also show, if we go from 3 bathrooms to 2, show what the difference would be?
No, I don't know that we could really draw up the construction documents that way. We would either draw it up with 2 or with 3. I guess we could try and draw it up with 3 and then say how much per bathroom, but that would be a much more difficult bid tab to create.
Okay, thank you.
We've already had that conversation about Portland Loo's there. That's actually where the Portland Loo discussion started, if you all remember, was talking about putting a Portland Loo outside of the Welcome Center. And then as we developed the plan to have more bathrooms added to the back of the Welcome Center, we moved the Portland Loo's to other locations. So please put on the next business meeting a discussion about LB 00, the $200,000 and the $50,000 for the Welcome Center, because I don't want us to make that decision here on the fly. Joel, Brian.
I was looking through the budget just now, and there's also $630,000 of general fund dollars in Dollar Mountain, and there's $410,000 general fund in Beacon Hill.
Okay, well, we can have a conversation about that on another day. We'll take a look at those general funds in the LB projects. Aaron.
Okay. My direction though is I'm looking at level of service changes for the $282,000 that we need, because that's where we're going. So just to let you know, that's what I mean. If one-time general fund dollars is available, that's a whole nother story, but I'm looking at level of service based on the discussion we had today.
I think that's where we're at.
Yeah, and those two aren't mutually exclusive. I agree.
Well, our next business meeting will be May 3rd, so we'll coming right up. It will actually precede any, well, it'll just be 2 days, I guess, after you have the workshop discussion on regarding that 280. Okay, I think we're up to Parklet Program. Hi, Mark.
Hi, thanks, Mayor. City Council members and members of the general public. Before you is the Pilot Parklet Grant Program. In terms of the summary, basically it's consideration of the Pilot Parklet Grant Program and its relationship to the council goals to encourage economic opportunities by encouraging public and private parklets in the central business district. By way of background, in response to COVID-19, City Council directed staff to work with interested businesses to install temporary parklets within the central business district. In April 2021, City staff presented details of current parklet installations and concept of semi-permanent parklets, which led to Council requesting a long-term seasonal parklet program. In October of 2022, the Central Business District Vitalization Task Force had recommended that this Parklet program have pre-approved designs where an opportunity for art and mural installations would be installed. And as recent as April 2023, the Tourism Advisory Committee recommended support of this program with strong safety guidelines, as well as questioning if the parklets would be allowed along 6th and 7th Street along the ODOT right-of-way. So the summary of this Parklet program, along with this slide presentation, there are draft guidelines that go along with this presentation. But essentially, the funding for this would be ARPA funds that had been previously earmarked in an amount of $38,000. Potentially, this $38,000 could fund up to 12 parklets, either public or private. And what I mean by public or private parklets are essentially, if you consider a restaurant, an extension of an outdoor seating area, whereas a public parklet would be considered just that, a public space for folks to gather and sit. This pilot program would grant up to $3,000 up to owners and operators in the Central Business District. And what this was formed in terms of how staff structured this grant program, it was at the review of best practices amongst Oregon communities, and having a suggested amount of $3,000 we believe would cover the cost of a public or private parklet. There are a couple options in terms of how we can structure this grant program. First is in terms of efficiency and rolling out this program as soon as possible. We would simply allow the businesses and operators to build, design, and own their own parklet. And this program, we would simply reimburse the businesses upon receipt of invoices up to an amount of $3,000. The other option in terms of rolling out this program, in terms of what the Vitalization Task Force had recommended, was that the city design pre-approved set of parklet plans so that businesses would have a choice of which parklet they wished to install, as well as a predetermined area for artwork. In this program, though, either A or B grants would be awarded on a reimbursement only, and parklets will have to be removed by November 1st. In terms of this program, staff would review and approve and award grants on first-come, first-served basis, and when a review committee made up of volunteers and staff would review those applications. So there would be no deadline, and this would be simply a rolling grant program. And within this grant program, staff document lessons learned. So next year, when we have a seasonal parklet program, based off this information will better inform us of what type of design guidelines, location, and whether it's important to businesses in order to maintain a seasonal permanent parklet program. In terms of our guidelines, again, in our design guidelines, two things came up in terms of our initial talks, particularly in the tourism committee. One, location. We would limit the parklets to one business frontage per business, so only one per business. And we would look at maximizing, or a total maximum per street, particularly on G Street. Other cities, in terms of best practices, limited parklets anywhere from 2 to 3 per street. We would look and provide or recommend limiting the number of parklets along a particular street, particularly G and H. In terms of safety, that came out both in our study of other best practices as well as the committee responses. So in terms of this program, we would require a three-sided facade and require K-rails along both three of the sides. And the K-rails are simply concrete barriers. And here's a kind of a cross-section of one now. It would be an opportunity for not only for safety, but also for an opportunity for the parklets to be designed so they can take advantage of covering that K-rail and make it a seating area or a planter or whatever the business wishes to maintain. The other safety features we would require is reflective material. We do require, in terms of accessibility and building requirements, that the parklet be level with the existing curb, that the parklet itself is easy to dismantle in case of emergency, and to have a load-bearing capacity of at least 100 pounds or more. In terms of maintenance, since the businesses or operators will own these parklets, it's up to the business to maintain and upkeep of this of the parklet and that the site be secure, particularly at night. And that was a best practice thing that we learned and incorporated within our design guidelines. Accessibility is required. So of these designs of all across the board, we would require liability insurance, and we do require property owner consent. And I know there was some comment from various commissions. It's no different from if a homeowner or a property owner would apply for a planning and permit. We do require that owner consent. In terms of the vitalization, central business violation feedback, as far as design alternatives, they sought this as an opportunity to, in terms of the parklets, to perhaps create 4 or 5 mini murals on these parklets, and that, again, will be part of the council actions. And I just put examples of the various murals that are out there now in the central business district. Pros and cons. So to my right, the pre-approved plans, pros and cons. If the council directs staff to move forward with pre-approved plans, the pros would be this will ensure a design standard, and it'd be helpful for owners to perhaps determine costs in a budget, and perhaps also easy to follow plans. The con of having pre-approved plans is this would require additional funding to be put, presumably from the ARPA funds, to pay a designer, to procure a designer, and then to come up with several plans for a review committee to review and improve. And this could take anywhere from 5 to 7 weeks in terms of additional time to procure a designer, get the designs planned, as well as voting on which plans to move forward. What we heard from the Tourism Advisory Committee particularly is that this pilot program, or this Parklet program, the sooner the better. They noticed that in terms of beer and wine licensing or special events permits from the state, it can take up to 4 to 6 weeks just to get that special event permit. So they advise that this particular program, if approved by council, be rolled out as soon as possible. This prohibited materials is really just simply to say, allow the business to build, design, and pay for the parklet. And in this, we would identify materials that are not conducive toward the central business district, namely fluorescent colors, shiny aluminum. We can go further in terms of what we don't want to see in terms of these parklet designs from businesses. And this would require no additional funding. We can move this out quickly, and the ARPA funds can move out to businesses out there. The cons of this is we may not, if we allow the business to build it, it may not yield the result that we want. But with these design guidelines, we hope to achieve that, and with the support of a voluntary committee choosing which business operator gets these funds, hopefully we can ensure a better design. Here's just some examples of parklets, both in Oregon and across the states. They're obviously very small, and they're very private. They can be a great feature, particularly in our central business district. And this one I want to kind of circle out. We built this program similar to Forest Grove, and they had a successful business build this parklet for about $1,000. So that gives you an idea of how $3,000 should get us to a built public-private parklet. The cost simplifications, again, the $38,000 was earmarked from the American Rescue Plan Act funds. These funds are available now. And so the call to action is to direct staff to move forward with the pilot Parklet grant program. And if you wish, the staff can look at maximizing a maximum number of parklets per street. We would recommend anywhere from 2 to 3. And then B or C. B would be simply to roll out the program, let the businesses go forward with design and maintaining and building their own parklet. This parklet pilot program would simply reimburse them. Or C, the city move forward and procure a designer to design several parklet designs, as well as get a pre-approval from presumably staff and the voluntary committee. With that concludes staff's report. Happy to answer any questions. There was a lot there, so.
All right, looks like we have some questions. I see Vanessa, Joel, Rob, Val.
In the grant, I was confused. Is this a structure that business could use year after year?
So, good question. We framed it as a pilot, so it would be a one-time pilot, or subject to funding availability. So if we don't exhaust those 38,000, we could potentially roll it out next season and take the lessons that we learned from this season and roll it out to next season.
Okay. And if a business did build a parklet, but they weren't awarded the grant, would they still be able to utilize that parklet if they had a sidewalk cafe permit?
Correct. Yeah, they
Okay.
would be. We would share this information with them to inform them as far as safety and building requirements.
Sure. Okay. And then lastly, is for a barrier, are the concrete barriers the only option? I know it's probably the most safe.
That's a good question. It's, in terms of best practices, that's what we've seen out there nationally, is a concrete barrier, because there's and maybe Jason can allude to this, but they essentially stop cars, or not stop them, but rather protect people from cars.
Okay, thank you.
Joel?
I'll yield to Rob and then talk after him. Go ahead, Rob.
All right, well,
So on the examples that you showed, could you get back to that slide and the $1,000 one from Cottage Grove or whatever? I don't see any K-rails there at all.
No,
And I don't-
they didn't require K-rails, right?
Okay, and so with only one that I see would potentially have a K-rail all those, so those aren't what they could look like here necessarily, and I'm just wondering how that adds to expense. But again, I think possibly only one, maybe the one in the middle with the red umbrellas, and that doesn't even have K-rails all around. So I don't know that those are really great examples for us to, basically decide on, because that's not what ours could look like. Is that accurate?
That would be accurate. I think, well, I would try to pull examples of both either K-rails or not, but obviously these aren't all K-rail.
Yeah, I don't know that any of them are. So if they, to me, that would add a whole nother level of complexity or engineering if a business whose expertise is not engineering, presumably it would be in restaurant, they then would have to add that into their engineering or their construction, which to me would be a major, would support the concept of having pre-approved designs, because we know we could guarantee the safety moving into them, which would be, I think, probably the city council's number one concern would be the safety of the diners. So I just don't see how we can guarantee safety if we're going to let people come up with their own design like that.
Valerie?
Yeah, I had another question, and that was on the location at the very beginning. When you were going to limit one per business maximum, how many did you say per street?
Best practices, anywhere from 2 to 3.
Okay, because I missed that. So there's 2 to 3 that could be on each.
We would seek council's direction if you first, want to maximize or provide a max on number of parklets per street, we can certainly look into, we would recommend.
And that's per block.
Per block, I'm
per
sorry.
block.
Okay, per block, yeah, so like between 4th and 5th or whatever, okay. And then I did have a question, it's much to what Rob was saying on the parklets that we see here. I guess I don't know exactly what K-rails are.
Maybe concrete barriers.
Okay,
It's what we've been using in the past. It's just
Okay.
say, for instance, that upper middle picture may have K-rails that have been covered by the wood. And so they put a fascia over the K-rails in some areas that's engineered that covers those so they don't look like they did where we had
right,
them.
where we had them. And then my question was, does the K-rails have to be on the third side also? So would they have to be further to block that, say, person sitting there from being hurt as well?
Correct, yeah, that would
Okay.
be a part of our design lines.
Okay.
3-sided K-rails
Okay,
in order to provide safety.
okay, thank you.
Rick and then Joel.
So,
No, Rick, and then Joel. You don't get to decide. When you passed, you lost your place, but you can go after Rick.
well, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate your honesty.
So on the number of parklets per block, do we know how many were there previously?
We don't, we have information in terms of overall, we had anywhere from 12 to 14 spread out through the central business district. It didn't appear that there were more than 2 or 3 per block, but we would maximize, or we would provide that ceiling right away, and that way, potentially, there wouldn't be parking spaces littered with parklets.
I just know it get rather confusing if all of a sudden we came out and said somebody had one there previously and wanted to come back for it, and they said, oh, no, you exceeded the limit, so it'd be nice if we could still match what was done in the past.
Yeah, in the past, we haven't had that criteria. We did have one that occupied their spacing, but it was more than one parking spot. We had one that was operating basically one parking spot. So with this, the street sidewalk frontage that structure may have, maybe 2 or 3, let's say it's 2 or 3 parking spots wide. I think the way it's written is they would have the ability to have one parklet. So they wouldn't be able to do their whole thing. They'd be able to take up one parking spot. And so let's say you've got 4 businesses in one block, you may have to do some kind of, if you were to say only 2 or 3 per block, you'd have to do some kind of process of determining who gets it each year.
Okay, thank you.
Joel?
So I had 2 things. One, the committee we had for the business district, their recommendations came out, in October of?
2022 is the report.
Okay, and those gave the recommendation that they would have pre-approved designs that would actually reduce costs because the business wouldn't have to design their own. They could just choose one of the 3 or 4 and implement it. And then also it wouldn't need review by the commission in the historic district. And it would and it would not, it would just be very simple. They can get it at the counter, they pick their design and they go for it, and it's very efficient for the business. That didn't happen. And so now the option to that is to have each business fund their own design, come to the city, it goes to the Historic Commission for review, into each one individually, and it seems like a much more cumbersome and expensive process. I don't quite understand how we got to where that was, where we just didn't do what the committee recommended, because there were business owners there, the hotel industry was there, tourism was there. I mean, the whole community was there on that business district. So you need to help me why I would have each business design their own and have an individual review rather than just have it done automatically and the city staff just okay it right at the counter.
So that is an option in terms of pre-approved designs. We would just need, it would just take a little bit more time to get those pre-approved designs done and chosen. The B option was simple, or the option to allow business to do it would only simply allow us to roll out the program faster. But there's certainly efficiencies to be made if there's only a handful of parklet designs that the business operator can choose from. And that was one of the pros, is that both the time budget and the pre-approved design would be automatic. In the case of letting businesses do their own design, right, we would have to review and approve their designs, and that may take some time as well. So we are offering, in terms of an option, to have or draft up pre-approved designs. We would ask that a portion of the opera funds be allocated for that, so we can procure and hire a designer to do that.
Rob?
So with regards to G Street, when we're talking about time frame and trying to roll it out quickly and all that stuff, I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only one here that sees the giant K-rails there in front of the construction project. So we're talking about worrying about a time frame. Well, when is that project going to be done, and when is the cement barriers that are there now going to be gone? On G Street.
Oh, on G Street.
I'm sure you've seen it. Yeah.
I know that there is an existing business that has, in terms of the K-rails out there now are related to construction outside. I don't know in terms of completion.
Mark, I can answer,
Oh,
I can answer that, but for you. Yeah, there's a right-of-way easement that that Bohemia currently has right now and is permitted under. We are approaching them and asking that they look at opening up the sidewalk again. Construction has gone on for way longer than what was anticipated. That project was supposed to have been completed in January. And so we're trying to work with the property owner to relinquish that and get the sidewalk opened up again until such time that it's actually needed to be closed.
So it would be a temporary opening until such time it needs to be closed? In other words, they might have to close it again to complete their construction? I mean, my point is that if there's a business there that wanted to invest potentially their own money into a parklet, and then they might have to, the whole street might get disrupted again. I don't understand that. That's not really much of a definitive answer for a business owner.
So Aaron was referring to, it would be like a day closure. They would close it for the day in order to do the work that they needed to do on the front of the building and then reopen it. The closure that's been there now, it was for the entirety of construction. However, we had been assured that construction would be complete in January, and it was to facilitate the installation of the fire line, the installation of new sidewalk and that. So now we're working with them. They may have another closure coming up, which would be a day or less, in order to do some of the front work where they have to stage their scaffolding on the sidewalk again, but it wouldn't be a long-term closure like this. And that's something that we would consider for any business downtown who's doing construction.
All right, we're kind of getting sidetracked here. Let's go back to the parklets. So I think we have two issues here. One is the grant and whether or not council approves doing the reimbursement grant program. And then the second issue is about design standards. So does anyone have questions about the grant? No. Okay. Questions about design standards? DJ?
I'm having a difficulty understanding the difference between what the committee had recommended and what staff is recommending. I know there's a disconnect there of some kind, and I've heard it's kind of a big deal, it's kind of a large deviation, but I haven't quite seen it yet. And so if I could please get that satisfied, I'm going to be able to make decisions on this.
So it's my understanding, DJ, that the committee, and correct me if I'm wrong, they wanted to make the process as efficient as possible and not have to go before the commission for approval of the parklets, and that it could be approved at the counter. And so you would have then these pre-approved designs where you just go in and yeah, you pick the one you want and just go do it. The unfortunate thing now, that was suggested back in October. Now we don't have time for this summer to implement that in a timely manner. So that's kind of a dilemma. And that way the businesses themselves wouldn't have to pay for the design. It would just be done, one of three designs, pick your design and do it. If the businesses design, build, and maintain their own parklet, then it has to go before the commission for approval, and that can just add another. They meet once a month. It's an additional workload that the committee on the downtown task force thought was we don't need to do that. Mm-hmm. We could go with a pre-approved design and make it a lot more efficient. Sure. And save money, because not each business would have to design their own.
Does that pretty much sum it up? Okay, thank you for that clarification again, Joel. I know sometimes it takes me a couple times to get it. And if I need to be corrected by
Rob, if you have some thoughts or whatever, but that's my understanding. But now we're in a dilemma because you have to have those designs done. They can be done rather inexpensively, 3 designs, but it takes time, and it's parklet season.
Is it a requirement of our code or HBSC somehow that if a temporary structure is added in the central business district, it has to go before the HBSC?
Not currently that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, so even if business was to do their own design, there wouldn't be that requirement, that it needs to go before the HBSC unless council desires that?
Yeah, it's my understanding, since it's the city right away, right? The jurisdiction falls on the city. So since we allow encroachment permits or allow sidewalk cafes, we would, under that same veil, review and approve it.
Okay, so it sounds like that's not a requirement that it go before HBSC unless you wanted to add that in.
So is it what is it, a permanent temporary structure? Is that what it is?
I'll go back to,
I mean, it definitely affects the historic nature of the downtown area. And there are some things that would be appropriate and not appropriate.
It's not a change to a building, though. It's, you know, it's not touching the buildings, so that's the difference. It's in the street.
right, we consider it seasonal, temporary use.
Okay. Did you have other questions, DJ? Okay. Rob, did you have a question?
So if someone were to, because theoretically this can be disassembled in one day, so if someone were to spend whatever they're going to spend, we have no idea what they're going to end up spending if they had to spend it themselves. It gets disassembled. I mean, their hope would probably be to use it in future years as well. So I'm concerned about it not being approved necessarily by HBSC, because this could end up being a semi-permanent fixture on G Street or any other street, because the business owner would presumably expect to use it again in future years. So I'd want this thing approved by somebody, whether it's you know, the city staff, and I don't know that they're necessarily the right body to approve that. Whether it's attached to a building or not, it may be there for years. So it needs to be approved, it seems like, because it could be used next year. That's currently the way we're looking at it, right?
Rob, I
Yeah.
think that's a council decision for discussion. It's not.
Well, actually, I just asked if that's the way it's proposed. It could be used next year, right? That's the way it's proposed, correct?
Correct, right.
Thank you. Yeah, that was my question. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? All right, I have a couple questions. First, as it came up in discussion, somebody mentioned something about a parklet being one parking space. Is there something written that would limit it to one parking space as opposed to the frontage of that particular business? Because I think almost all the businesses are going to be probably two parking spaces, you know, directly in front of their own business.
The best practices had recommended one parking space in front of the business, so we're following that thought.
Okay.
Is that your question? Sorry, Mayor.
Yeah, where is that coming from?
Just a review of best practices in terms of other jurisdictions.
Okay.
There's a balance between businesses and their parking versus providing outdoor parklet space, so that was
Okay.
limiting
I mean,
it to one.
they have been bigger, I guess is why I'm wondering where that changes, because one parking space is basically equivalent to like one table or maybe two very small tables. And I'm just thinking of like the Laughing Clam is, you know, probably 2 to 3 car lengths. And they've been using that entirety of their store frontage. So that would be a change. I'm also wondering about the limitation per block, where that's coming from, because, you know, there could be, especially since we've been doing these for restaurants, and now we're talking about allowing anybody to create a space in front of their business. There may be 3 restaurants on a block. Where is the limitation coming from?
Same best practices in terms of, again, balancing the need for parking, convenient parking to businesses versus providing a public-private
Yeah,
parking.
and council can have that as open or closed as possible. You can have your storefront boundary, you don't have to have a limit on how many parklets per block. That's all up to you to determine. And if we do go with, and I think council, if we do go with pre-approved designs, there are a lot of organizations, municipalities that already have in place pre-approved engineer block designs, and it may not necessarily be a T-rail. They do make concrete blocks that are 3 feet high, and they're like a rectangle, just concrete block. And then what you do is you set on top of those these like plastic, it's like a shoebox or something you put on top that's got some architectural design to it, and they're planter boxes on top. And so there are things that can be put into place right away. I don't think we may necessarily need to go out and engineer something. We can take the best of everyone else's, what everyone else has learned, and we can adopt those and move forward with that. So I think that there is a possibility for us to still move forward with some positive movement this season, even if we went to pre-engineered.
Yeah, I guess I was hoping we would have more of that today, because I did mention a couple of weeks ago now a desire to have kind of fleshed out design guidelines to put before council. The clock is ticking. But one more question I had here was in regards to K-rails is awfully specific, and I know that there are other kinds of concrete barriers that are more attractive and kind of slimmer, or, you know, planter boxes, things that are different, that might provide the same level of safety without looking like a, you know, industrial construction project or a freeway. Have we considered those? Why aren't we showing council examples of those?
We can consider those. I think the KRL was kind of the default in terms of businesses and particularly vehicle traffic, but certainly those are all options and we can bring them forward.
Okay, I mean, I think nobody wants the ugly concrete barriers, but they want the concrete safety, you know, so we need to get a move on this project. Okay, I think, any more questions before we just go with discussion? Okay, I think we're ready for discussion. Go ahead, Joel.
So, you know, I just went to Manhattan. I spent a week in Manhattan, and it was great. I went to Chinatown. They have parklets in Chinatown. They look horrible. It doesn't fit within the historic version of China. It looks like a slum. It was not appropriate. That doesn't mean that would happen here. But the pre-approved designs, especially if we can get them done in an efficient manner, in a timely manner, so that we don't, I mean, it's not like, Rob, come to me and here, try to guess what I think is appropriate and that I'll approve. You know, you could, and by the way, pay for the design yourself. You know, that wouldn't go over very good. So I would strongly suggest that we get the pre-design from other cities, run them by the Historical Commission, that's why they're there, and have, when they come in, pick one of the three, and we avoid the situation that they got in Chinatown.
Rob.
So I basically agree, Joel. I mean, it makes the most sense from an expediency standpoint. And I'd love, and it might be a really short time frame for staff to just email us some pictures of what a covering over a K-rail could look like. I mean, they may look great. You know, I got nothing against K-rail if it's going to look good. So if there's stuff that looks reasonable, that means that we could do it here, and it might just involve an artist coming up with a few different designs, whether it's 3 or more. But again, Joel made a really good point that, you know, you're going to ask somebody to design their own, then it could get rejected, and now you got a real, you know, now you get a lot of bad will. So I'd rather just have it be so really easy for businesses. You know, they decide they want it, they choose one, and they already know that it's going to be approved, and we move forward. You know.
Yeah, there's a lot of cities that have been doing this for a number of years, even before COVID, and there's some good-looking safety barriers that are utilized for parklets that are, for the most part, aesthetically pleasing. I know we all have an idea of what our opinion is of aesthetically pleasing is, but the mass appeal of all the engineering has been put into those. You could put one to 3 different types, and they're all going to be a likable use for the parklets.
All right, let's go through some questions here so we can provide some direction. I guess, first of all, in terms of the grant program, are you interested in moving forward with the grant reimbursement program? $35,000. Yes, okay, that was an easy one. In terms of, creating a pilot program, we have been allowing businesses to use their own storefront? Do you want to limit it to one parking space or to the storefront of the business? Valerie's saying storefront.
Right.
Everybody agree with that? Go ahead, Rick.
I know parking is a premium, and if somebody had a storefront that went 4 parking spaces, I think there maybe should be some consideration for limiting it to 2 or 3, but not take the entire frontage.
Rob?
So what we had agreed on prior was they had to get the permission of the abutting business. So to me, I'd be okay with their storefront as long as their neighbors are satisfied.
Yeah.
Because that was going to be another question, but okay, so storefront, everybody seems okay with storefront. What about neighbor permission? Do you want to require neighbor permission? It could create hard feelings if a neighbor says no.
Well,
But
well, one place, yeah, either way, there could be hard feelings. But I do know in one particular place that one parking place was very important to a business. And after they had to get permission, then they were able to use, they gave up that parking place, but they still had a ample place. So I do think getting neighbors' permission is important.
Okay, so hands for neighbor permission. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 3 no's. And we don't know where Brian stands on that, huh? Okay, so we'll leave that into the draft for now. I guess we're going to have to sign off on this at some point anyway, so leave neighbor permission in the draft. How about limiting parking spaces, limiting the number of parklets per block? Do you want to place a limit on the parklets per block? No? Rick?
Well, given the size of the blocks, and especially if some of the stores use their entire frontage, I guess we really should look at what the impact is, because if you had 2 or 3 stores and they had 90% of the parking spaces, I don't think that would be appropriate. So I think because you could find you had no parking left, although we put the condition in there that people have to agree to it, so maybe that's the balance.
And it's limited to their own storefront. Rob?
Yeah, I definitely think it should be limited per block. I mean, otherwise you're essentially potentially changing someone's business model, taking away their only parking space on a block, and we've basically essentially stolen someone's parking space for the benefit of another business. It just seems ridiculous to me. So to me, there should be a maximum per block, and of course, again, neighbors' approval for the same reason. Otherwise, you're stealing.
Do you have a proposal for maximum per block?
Well, I guess how do you define a block? Because if you look at G Street, one side of the block is essentially 2 blocks, and the other side is 1 block. So that the 5th to, I don't know, we have to define how big a block is, I guess.
And I guess you have to consider each side, if you're talking about limiting it to, 2 per side or 2 total.
So last year you had what on between 5th and 6th on G? Well, you had between 6th and 5th, you had 1, right? You had Laughing Clam. And then on the other side, you had, was it 2 or 3? It was 3. Well, I definitely wouldn't go more than 3, that's for sure. What's that? 4, there was 3. 3. And circled, yeah, 3.
Maybe Lulu's or something?
3 would be maximum as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so Rob wants to suggest 3 maximum on one side of each block? Or are you talking 3 on either side, like your block there?
Well,
If you-
3 like between 5th and 6th or 4th and 5th.
Okay, so if you did one and the hall did one on the opposite
Oh, I
side of
see
the
what you're saying.
street, is that 2 or is that 1 on each side of the block?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to have that issue. Well, we're not going to have that issue. You've got, the hall's the only, yeah, it's not going to come up. But I would say, I'd say a total of 3 on both sides combined, but I don't think it's going to come up, at least not in the blocks that I'm thinking of right
Okay.
now.
So let's see if council would be supportive of that. Would you be supportive of limiting it to 3 per block and counting both sides as the total? Joel, that was a yes?
Yeah, 3 is fine.
Is anyone else interested in putting a maximum? I think there's just 2 of you interested in putting a maximum. So no max. Is this limited to restaurants, or can other businesses do a parklet? Vanessa?
I say leave it open. Let's see what the free market has to offer.
Okay. She said leave it
I
open.
said leave it open. Let's see what the free market has to offer.
So any business could do a parklet. I mean, we're going to have to sign off on this again in the future, but Rob?
And I find it really interesting that we've got a free market capitalist over here, and then we have a socialist over here who's worried about stealing people's parking places. You know, something isn't connecting here. You know what I mean? I mean, you can't just go ahead and take somebody whose business has been there for many, many years with the assumption they've got a certain amount of parking, and then the council just comes in and steals their parking. And we haven't even had a public discussion on the stealing of the parking. But we can't be stealing parking and then have an unlimited number as well. But, you know, we can see what the free market wants. Yeah, businesses could move out of the downtown or get screwed and complain and whatever. But this is a strange conversation that really needs to be thought out more thoroughly from the perspective of a business owner who's relying on certain amounts of parking, especially if they've got a business where maybe they cater to older people, they can't walk that far, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to steal their parking, really, and have an unlimited number? Think about it.
But don't you have down at the park, the neighbors have to agree? So wouldn't that take care of it? If the neighbor doesn't want it next door, they just have to say no.
That would take care of it to some degree, and I would agree. I'm not sure. Did we vote on neighbors to some degree?
Right,
Yeah,
right now with
it
neighbor.
doesn't help for the whole block, but yeah.
Yes, right now neighbor permission would be required. Rick?
So I would be in favor of limiting it to restaurants.
Vanessa?
Councillor Pell, is your concern possibly offset by the increased amount of pedestrians in the area? I do understand the niche customer base that needs to pull up to the front door, but is that offset at all by the increased amount of pedestrians up and down G Street and H Street?
Well, I'm thinking of one particular business, like Frame Shop, and I have no relation with them other than I can nod and say hello. They have people that carry, large projects in and out. They themselves are elderly. I know one of them is handicapped, I believe. And I don't know that increased foot traffic is necessarily going to help the Frame Shop at all. It may, but you couldn't count on that. Would it help a shoe store? Possibly. It's not going to help some types of businesses. So, again, I think that the perspective of all the business owners needs to be, I know, for instance, like Don's Bikes, last time I talked to them about something like this, often they help people put bikes on the racks and in and out of the cars, et cetera, et cetera. Would their business be increased enough to have to absorb that inconvenience of having to necessarily maybe walk a half a block or a block to then put the bike on top of the car? So again, and if people take the bikes off the cars themselves, again, they've got to carry them further or whatever. So, no. So I guess the answer to your question is it wouldn't, because it really, while the increased foot traffic might help some businesses, I don't know that it would help others at all.
Okay, so at this point, the question is whether we would leave it open or limit it to restaurants. So I guess raise your hand if you want to limit it to restaurants. 3, okay, that leaves the 4. Okay, we're going to leave it to restaurants in this draft that we're going to write up. We had 4 out of 7. Okay, the 2 tough questions are coming up now. Regarding K-rails, are you comfortable? Do you want to require some sort of concrete barrier. Because as you saw in these other pictures, that's not always a requirement of other communities. And I would say personally, it doesn't have to be limited to K-rails, but we're talking about a significant, concrete barrier. Rob?
Okay, so we could live it up to the free market, and people could sit out in the roadway dangerously, and if that's what they choose to do, and if they choose to not care about their family and their safety, then free market is spoken. Or we could actually try to protect the pedestrians. So I'm not necessarily married to K-rails, but I'd want something that is from an engineering perspective, is sound. And I'm not an engineer, but I think that something has to be done to protect, some minimal protection standard needs to be employed.
Okay. So how do you all feel about having concrete barrier of some sort? Is that something you want to require, as opposed to just letting people do a wood frame structure or? Yes. You have something, Joel?
Well, if we have pre-approved designs,
That's the next question.
right, but they could all incorporate, not necessarily a concrete barrier, but public safety into that, and even if they're steel or whatever, I mean, so I'm not sure we need to be redundant and say they have to be concrete at this point in time, but those designs need to incorporate public safety.
Okay, well, that's the next question, is whether you want to provide pre-made designs or whether you want to let the free market rule within the parameters that we have just established, which, so do you want to provide pre-made designs? Rob, go ahead.
So I do, and it's not a question of the free market in this case, because the free market would involve potentially exorbitant amounts of staff time, or a lot more staff time, people being turned down, possibly spending money for designs that don't get used. So there's a lot more to it than that. You can't, it's free market would mean that there's actually not even any approval process. So I'd like to see pre-approved that has safety, minimal level of safety built in, and that way we know the public's safe, and from a staff perspective and from council perspective, it would be the fastest. It would be the easiest.
Rick?
I'm in favor of the pre-design, and also staff indicated they maybe get some pre-designs from other jurisdictions that already exist that we would use. Thank you.
Vanessa?
As well, I do know that Jim Love offered to research and develop some pre-approval designs, so I hope we can take him up on that.
Okay, so raise your hand if you want pre-approved designs. Okay, that was everybody. And so do you want those to be reviewed by the HBSC before we approve them for use, or do you? I mean, because that, I'm going to say, is the next step, that it can just go straight to HBSC and then come to you in order to expedite this process. So I saw two hands that way. Okay. So we'll have this go to HBSC so that it can come back immediately to council with HBSC's feedback already in place. Any other comments you want to make, guidance as far as height, flowers, umbrellas, murals, colors, anything of that sort to provide direction so that we can get this process going? Vanessa, then Joel?
I would like to see a clause that requires expedient graffiti removal on behalf of the grantee, of course.
Okay. Joel?
I was just going to inject some levity, a hot bowl of clam chowder at him.
You want clam chowder to be a part of the pre-approved design? Okay. Okay, so as far as people's umbrellas, the type of wood, the colors, we're not going to weigh in on that. Okay, in that case, if staff, and I'm just going to say that the floor being even with the curb is a given, if you could please create some pre-approved designs, allow people and create a process and have it reviewed at the HBSC as quickly as possible so that we can get this show on the road for this summer, but we're going to allow people assuming council's final approval here to have a parklet the length of their storefront. That's going to require neighbor permission. There's not going to be a max per block. It's going to be limited to restaurants. It's going to require concrete barriers, and we're going to provide some pre-approved designs and put in there that we expect expedient graffiti removal. Anything else? All right. Hey, East Park Street survey. There's still more on the agenda.
Great, I think I'm up. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. This should be a fairly quick presentation, but it is still a very good presentation based upon some of our citizens' concerns. So, East Park Street Survey. Subject and summary: East Park Street parking survey feedback. And relationship to your council goals is simply to enhance community safety. And just a kind of little history on this one, council received feedback from your constituents regarding parking issues on East Park Street. Council therefore requested staff to complete a parking survey, which we did. It was a short survey and it was mailed to residents on East Park Street between 7th Street and Grants Pass Parkway. Residents had the option to complete the survey online or simply mail it back. Survey was mailed to 41 homes and each given 10 days to complete the survey. Total of 17 responses were received. So I did put printouts in front of you, so you all have these survey results in front of you, and I think it was also sent out in a council memo, so that might also jar some memory. But essentially, the feedback we received is as follows. 76% of residents think there's sufficient on-street parking most of the time. 12% of the residents believe there is always sufficient parking. 41% of the residents said vehicles park near their residence for 24 hours or more. 35% would like to have residential parking permitted only. 24% would like to see no overnight parking. 18 want time parking. 6 painted curbs on both sides of driveway entrances. And just some feedback additions as we continue on with the presentation. Respondents were asked to share any of their other parking concerns or just any other ideas that they may have. And the predominant theme identified throughout this were concerns with unhoused people parking overnight. Residents are concerned about crime, disturbances, littering, and a feeling of simply being unsafe in their homes. I do communicate with a particular neighbor on that street, and he has shared on numerous occasions firsthand experience of the neighborhood concerns. So the call to action today is in your hands, Council, at your discretion, and I'm looking for direction for whatever you guys want to do next, future workshop and or a business meeting, but essentially this is right back to Council. If you have any questions, I'll stay up here and I can answer any questions as best that I can.
Thanks, Chief. Rob, then Rick.
2 questions, Chief. So when you said, X percentage of residents, was that the percentage of the residents or the percentage of the respondents?
Yeah, it's a good question. Just the percentage of the homes. Each home received a survey.
But not all of them, wait a minute, but only some small percentage, less than half, responded. So it must be percentage of respondents you're talking about.
Well, if you consider one respondent per home, so yes, it could be respondents, yes, it could be homes. We didn't send multiple surveys to each home.
Right.
We just sent a survey to a home.
Right.
And out of those homes, I guess you could call them respondents or
Right.
homes. I think we're saying the same thing.
Well, No, it's completely different.
No, the respondent is the people who responded to the survey. So 41% of the homes responded to the survey. So when you see here, like 76% of residents, it's residents who responded.
Of the respondents.
So 3/4 of the 17,
Right,
yeah.
of the responding homes. So, so we really don't know, I guess, what a majority even think. But then you went on to say that it was a pretty big percentage that were concerned with, you said overnight parking of non-residents, basically? What was the last?
So I'm just saying what we received on paper.
Right,
So
and I'm sorry, I don't have that, right. I looked at it, but I don't have it in front of me.
I can
But
pull it up
the
right
last thing you said was something about a larger number was concerned with, yeah, I have that.
yeah, the respondents were asked to share any other parking concerns or other ideas that they may
Right.
have. So the residents are concerned about crime, disturbances, littering, and the feeling of being unsafe in their home. That is directly from that survey you have in front of you.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Rick?
Thank you, Chief. Your 41% is really to be commended because that's a high return for a survey. So I thought you did really well there in getting that response. But I have some questions.
Yeah.
Of the 41% that responded between the Parkway and 7th Street, were the majority of those concentrated across from the park, or was it evenly distributed for the entire length?
Yeah, it's a great question. It was evenly distributed. When we put this together, I asked the folks that helped me do this, Susan Clark and Kendra Astry in my office, and essentially if your home touched each park street, but let's say you might be on one of the cutoff streets or the side streets, I forget, then you got a survey.
Okay. So the purpose of that question, if the majority of the people, which I expected if it was discerned, were that had those concerns about feeling about crime and so forth, those would have been right next to the park.
It could vary. I don't have that answer. I think it's a mix of both because I think we've seen problems on all ends of Park Street, whether you're closer to the Parkway or closer to the 7th or directly across from the park. I would imagine folks that live directly across from the park might have a different perspective than folks that might be a little bit closer to the Parkway.
Okay, thank you.
Vanessa?
Counselor Pell? I don't know if you had your question answered, but it's number 6 that you're after. In other write-in, people were asked if they had any other, and it's just below 4, 3 out of 4 indicated no overnight parking.
Do we have the original petition that was submitted by the residents? Because I meant to bring it and I forgot what their request was. The background on this, the reason why we did this survey is that we received a petition signed by some residents on East Park Street, particularly across the street from the park, to make some sort of parking change. And what was it that they asked for on that? I think they asked for
I think they asked for no parking on.
no overnight
parking on the side of the street. I don't have that in front of me. I would have to have Karen look that up.
Okay, if somebody could look that up, that would be great. The reason why we did this survey is because the petitioners who signed it did have, I believe, we'll find out exactly what they were asking for, but before I speculate out loud, I guess, but you have no idea what the people who didn't sign it or what the other neighbors might think. So the survey was a way to get feedback from other people about potential solutions. And I guess when we talk about closing street parking, some people may have driveways or garages that they don't need to park on the street, and other people may, have either limited space where they can park or too many cars to park within their own property. And so if you were to close street parking overnight or permanently, it would create a problem for them, and we don't have a way of assessing that, based on the people who signed the original petition. So this is a way for us to get feedback, I guess, about what's going on along Park Street as we look into helping with their question. Vanessa?
To answer your question, they did ask for no overnight parking on both sides of the street.
No overnight parking on both sides of the street. So that's what those people had asked for, and there were, I believe, 12. Do you have it handy? Ten people had signed it. Dwayne?
Question maybe Aaron or Chief, do we have, if we had no parking but residents had a sticker or something, we have something to do that, or is that feasible? If we gave them like something to say, hey, this is your parking pass, is that something we can do?
I think the short answer is yes, it's something we can do, but earlier today, we're talking about cutting parking enforcement, so I just wanted to bring that back to your attention.
Yeah, that's a pretty good comment.
Other questions or discussion? Valerie?
Yeah, I kind of follow up with that. I say no overnight parking, but then for somebody who needed to have it, because some of them did say that they have extra cars that they need to park and they don't have a garage or something, then, or driveway, then in that case, they had a special, something to hang in there saying that they were a resident.
And I guess the other thing, to consider, I guess, as we're discussing this, the overnight parking is one issue, and we also have the question of daytime parking, and obviously this is right along the park. It's very popular for, any sort of event, whether it's a ball game or a concert or just playground stuff. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I mean, other cities do it all the time. There's, you have a resident parking sticker, for overnight parking, and someone could apply for 2 or 3 of them. I mean, there are some families that could have 4 cars. So, and it would seem to me that, we'd want to have parking that was allowed to come and go during the day for all the reasons that Sarah just said. It's the park gets used during the day. So you'd want that. I don't know. To me, this seems pretty simple. I'm not seeing any negative to having resident parking stickers. With the only negative is, being able having to enforce it. But you would think that at some point, one as part of their kind of normal travel or their normal rounds, you would think that the police could swing down that street and just check for stickers in each one of the cars. But to me, that would be the simplest way to address this, and probably as effective as any other way.
Rick?
One hesitation I have, if you put something into effect and then you don't enforce it, then the public looks at you with scorn, and especially those people that are, living there, trying to use, if there's no enforcement, then even if they don't have a parking sticker, they're going to park there. Thank you.
DJ?
Yeah, we have an issue with a couple people in this area. When I read this survey for what it's for, there's 17 out of 41 people, 8 of which say they never have problems parking. We're talking about 9 people here that find it difficult to park on this road, and we're talking about a 1 mile stretch of, or half mile, whatever it is, of public roads. I'm not willing to go to those extremes on that much public parking for what this survey tells me is a concern of a very few people. This
Maybe
can call to this, what's that?
Just to clarify, maybe it's not clear what the concern is, homeless people parking overnight in front of their homes.
Yeah,
It's-
no, I
okay,
understand what that,
okay.
yeah, I definitely understand what that is. And then taking that also then a step forward, and this is not the only place we have this issue. We have this issue in many other places. Sometimes they're not right next to parks. Sometimes they're in other residential areas that are popular. Where do we stop this effort? How do we appropriately legislate away from this? That's a tough question, Eliminating overnight parking, that seems extreme. Residential parking permits, we have an enforcement issue. I'm very careful about how far we take this in that area, given those concerns.
Joel, then Vanessa?
Well, my thoughts were along what DJ said, and I feel for all the parties, including the people sleeping in their car. Valerie and I went to some residences down there by Baker Park and just asked them what their experience was like, and they're suffering effects that are not of their own cause. It's called an externality, where mailboxes were getting rifled through, cars were getting broken into, people running across their yards, stuff like that. But then, if you do it here, there's other areas in the city that I'm sure the residents would like the same thing. And then, where do you stop and where do you start, and then how do you enforce it? Policy-wise, it's kind of it's a tough one. So I'm not saying I have an answer for it. I look at the options, the different options, and they got options right here. Residential parking permitted only, no overnight parking, time parking. And then there was a mitigation measure that was for safety, painted curbs on both sides of the driveway entrances, which is throughout the whole city. That just isn't on Park Street, though the Park Street's got a pretty high volume of cars going up and down it. But I just wonder from a policy standpoint, we manage the whole city, not just Park Street, and we need to manage it in a consistent manner that serves the needs of the citizens. And how do we do that in this case? That is feasible and enforceable. I asked the question.
Vanessa?
After reading the results of the survey, I also am not seeing this as a discussion on issues of parking. Number 3, is there sufficient on-street parking? 76% of the respondents did say most of the time, and that is typical throughout the survey. So I'm really not reading this as a parking issue. This is really an issue of unhoused people utilizing vehicles as homes in front of residential areas, and I think the council should consider the root cause of the issue, and I really would like to encourage us to discuss some type of safe parking program like dozens of other cities up and down the West Coast have established, so that we're not just moving this issue to another part of town, and we're really trying to get to the root of the problem here.
Dwayne, then Rob?
I just want to say that our people are screaming for help, and no one wants to do anything. Everything they say, they ask for help with the situation, and would say it's not a parking issue, and I would agree it's not a parking issue. Well, it's not a normal person parking issue. It's a homeless parking issue. So, and they want help. You got citizens meeting up, citizens on social media. Something's going to happen bad in this town eventually. Some citizen in this town is going to rise up and do something really bad, and we're going to have a problem here soon. I've already seen some really dumb comments on Facebook, and at some point, we're going to be the blame that we didn't listen to people. We didn't ask, we didn't do anything to set some kind of rules up for bad behavior. And I'm not saying that some of your guys' things are not valid, but there is going to be a point here that that we're going to have a situation this week. Chief tells me there's no enforcement in the parks this week. Both of our officers are off. I don't know what they're doing, but whatever they're doing, they're not there this week. So this week in the parks is a free-for-all. So those people on East Park Street, when they are just they can just have to live with everything we do, because there's nobody casing them for 72 hours or moving along or bad behavior or bringing their couches in or whatever they're doing there. We're going to have a problem at some point. That's my warning, that And I agree that we do have restrictions in here. We have 3-hour parking on 6th and 7th Street sometimes. We have 3-hour parking on some other J streets. So I think we need to do things we can control and things we can't control. And I know we can't control someone resting, but we can control other bad behaviors. So just to think about those things, and I don't know what the right answer is, so.
Hang on, DJ's asking.
Dwayne, I just want to just ask you something real quick. So, yeah, yes, we have an issue. Yes, it's beyond that. But so what, given this East Park issue and the results of it and all the things that you said, do you have something that you're recommending that we do in response, or?
I just feel like we need to deter continued behavior. This Sunday was, I don't know, I read all those emails. I read every email we get from people, and I actually know someone that was down there, and he told me there was a gigantic congregation of homeless people waiting to be fed, and it's just becoming this growing, I watched every video for the last 2 years of all of you talk about homeless since the beginning of 2021. And when you first started, you started in Riverside Park only. Now it's pretty much every park, but Baker, Morrison. Morrison's actually cleaned up because baseball season. I wish we had baseball in all the parks, actually. Morrison's clean now for some reason because of baseball. But, Baker and Tussing are getting worse. You guys 2 years ago were talking about it, and there was only one little section of Riverside. So it is growing, and people are screaming for help. So if we could deter the motorhome parking in front of the daycare on East Park Street, then I would think that we could help the lady out that has a daycare in front of East Park Street. Most of the time, there's not cars parked on East Park Street. I drive by there probably more than anybody, 5-6 times a week. It's the overnight parking and the, speeding through there. And once everybody kind of goes to sleep, especially when it gets warm, if you know anything about law enforcement, as soon as it gets warm, everything comes out and crazy at night. So it is true. I was a sheriff reserve for a couple of years, and as soon as it gets warm, it's like a free-for-all. When we're sleeping, most people are sleeping. I don't know what it is about the heat, but it's going to get worse this summer. So we have to think of some better solutions to protect citizens. And we can't protect our parks right now, but we can at least protect in front of their house or something that there's nobody parking in front of it. I know all of you wouldn't want a big motorhome that's broken down and working on with trash hailing out of in front of your home. I wouldn't, but I'm just saying we have to do something to help these people.
Rob?
Yeah, I guess, first I want to say that I agree with Vanessa that we should be looking for a more permanent and longer-term solution. And anybody that's watched all our council meetings on homelessness knows that I was willing to take actions that apparently the majority, for the most part, didn't want to take. But that's not what we're talking about today. I don't understand, both DJ and Joel said that they're concerned with some extreme consequences if we were to prohibit overnight parking by non-residents. And I just don't see what those extreme consequences, or why that's a slippery slope, why that's something to be feared. If someone could explain that, what are the extreme consequences of preventing non-residents from parking? A lot of cities do it all over the entire city, but and for different reasons than we have. Number one, I got to ask that question. But number two, we hear all the time, and we know better than anybody, the council knows better than anybody except maybe the chief and maybe Aaron, that essentially the feds, and to some degree the state, has tied our hands as far as what we can do in the parks, right? We all know that. We feel completely impotent as far as being able to do anything in the parks that would benefit the majority of people. This we can do. I mean, we can actually prohibit overnight parking on the street that's closest to our biggest problem. I just don't understand why the negative there would outweigh the potential benefit. Someone could try to explain it, I guess. To me, this is pretty simple. We got a major problem. The biggest concentration of that problem, we can do a little something about it within, existing local, federal, and state laws, and yet why would we choose not to? What is the extreme problem that was going to be created?
So in response to Rob, I don't view it as an extreme measure, Rob. Those are your words, not mine. I was just concerned about the policy, and if we want to try one of those measures on Park Street, I'm fine with that. But just go in there with our eyes open in terms of policy, because there's other areas that are probably very similar, where the residents would like to do that. And there's some enforcement issues, I think, with our funding and the limited resources that we have that may not make a difference anyway. But, you know, in terms of putting it in on Park Street, if that's something that we want to do, I'm certainly willing to try it. I don't view it as an extreme measure, because I was thinking of 4th Street, Washington Boulevard up there with the semi-trucks. And there were some specific parking regulations associated with them on Washington Boulevard. And I can't remember what it is, but it was specific for that area to handle a problem in that area. So we do that policy-wise. I was just wondering from a policy standpoint how we handle that in an appropriate manner.
So I want to make sure that we stay focused on parking and the needs of parking in this area, and we don't transition into other things. And we're right on that border there. The other thing, when it comes to parking, just so we can clear up this residential permit parking only during evening hours or whatever, that would still not prohibit an RV or something to park there during the day. We would still have to provide 72-hour notice. So it would still sit there for 3 days, potentially. And again, I just want to make sure we're focusing on parking standards. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, that seems like a very good point. So if let's say we did implement a residential parking sticker for overnight parking, and somebody was parked there that didn't have the sticker, and a neighbor called and complained, because I'm going to assume it's mostly a complaint-based system. Police show up, and they have to tag it for 72 hours before the person can be moved along. So it effectively makes no difference.
Yes, but we could still give them a ticket for parking.
After 72 hours?
No, we can still give you a ticket for illegal parking, but we just can't force you to leave for 72 hours.
Okay, so they would receive the fine aspect of the ticket immediately. Okay. Well, I guess I didn't catch the extreme comment, but what I did hear a couple counselors just express some concerns about where do we stop. If we were to implement this for one street, do we start implementing it for others? I think the homeless population would move to a different location. So are you just dispersing it to a different street, you know, rather than addressing the root cause or providing a long-term solution? Typically, other communities that would implement kind of a residential parking sticker would be because they're in a urban area where parking is extremely limited, and so you're trying to give a preference to people to be able to park at their own home rather than excluding others. So we have to weigh those. Dwayne?
This still wouldn't forbid them from parking at Riverside Park. There's a parking lot there, so they can still park at Riverside Park. They just wouldn't be able to park in front of someone's house. And we do have a couple of streets that say no campers on them. Was it by Winco over there? There's no campers supposed to be there, and sometimes they do, but then CSOs or somebody comes by and they get marked and they're illegally parking. So, I mean, I think we should try something to deter this. If they want to park at the Riverside Park, then they can park in the parking lot. But the problem is like the Hansons that were currently cited, instead of moving all their junk, because they got banned from Riverside Park, they parked right there on East Park Street in front of someone's house with all their garbage out in front and caused the problems. So I would agree with Rob. We need to try at least do something. to deter, at least keep it into the park and not all over the streets, so, whatever.
Okay, well, we're lacking an actual proposal, I guess, at this point. So does somebody, I think that there's good arguments to be made on all sides if somebody wants to make a motion or suggest how we move forward. Rob?
Yeah, I'd make a motion that parking on East Park be, overnight parking, require a resident permit, a resident sticker. So no non-residents are allowed to park overnight. I guess, I don't know, as defined by midnight to 6, something like that, or whatever the chief would recommend.
I'll second.
Seconded by Dwayne and Val. Okay, so to implement, do you want to define East Park, the entirety of it, or adjacent to the park? Seventh to the Parkway?
Would that
Okay.
be on both sides or just one side?
I think.
On
right
on
there
one side,
is a
on
bike
the
path.
north side from Parkway to the park, there's a bike lane. And then the bike lane disappears because you're supposed to go through the park to continue west. So there's already no parking on the north end of Park Street from Parkway to the park because of the bike lane.
It's not on both sides. I think you can't park on the north side between Riverside Park and Baker Park because there's a bike lane, right? So there's just parking on one side of the street for a portion.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm saying both sides, and I realize part of it wouldn't apply anyway. But both sides of the street from midnight to 6 a.m. or something like that.
Okay, I have a
Resident sticker
question.
required.
If we vote on this today, are we voting to do it? Or are we voting to have it come to a business meeting?
So this is a change that would require council action in a business meeting. We'll bring this forward to you in a business meeting.
Okay, so how many counselors are interested in having this go forward to a business meeting? 3, 4, 5. Okay, got 5. Okay, we will put that on a business meeting to develop a residential parking permit. Anything further on East Park, this issue? Okay. Agenda review. And I have a question before we do agenda review. I was wanting to know, we had a story in the newspaper and then some conversation, I guess, on social media over the weekend about the car show moving out of Riverside Park. So what's the status on that? What discussions have taken place, or?
I've had a conversation with the Rogue Valley Classic Cruisers, who puts on the Back to the 50s show and shine at Riverside Park. Their board 2 weeks ago did meet and make a recommendation to move to the fairgrounds. And and after that discussion, I reached out to the Classic Cruisers and I'm trying to see if there's interest with them moving back into the park if we had the flexibility of leasing the park to them like we do Boatnik. So just trying to work through that, and I don't have all the answers and pieces put together, but that's in theory the picture that we're trying to paint.
So did they ask for something at that meeting that they didn't get? Or the comment that their hand was forced to move, was that just because they felt that there were safety concerns that were forcing their hand, but did they ask for something that we weren't able to provide, or?
It was, I didn't know, I don't know, I wasn't at that board meeting, but my understanding was they made a decision for what they believed was the best for the club and safety of the patrons.
Okay, but they didn't make any specific requests of the city that?
I am not, I was not part of any meeting like that, so I don't know. I just
Oh.
know that I'm seeing if I can get them back into the park.
I'm sorry, I thought they met with you. Did they? They haven't met with you?
They did not meet with me, no. I don't meet with them at that level. They may have met with someone from our Parks and Rec department or from community development, but
Okay, so we don't know, I mean, I guess there's kind of this confusion that somehow the council is not letting them be there, or, is not making it available for them to be there, you're not familiar with any conversations that the city has not accommodated a request that they have?
no, we'd be very accommodating, and we would accommodate them like we have all other years, according to our rules and regulations, and what we have to follow with regards to everything that occurs in the parks. So we are very open to trying to get people to utilize the park, and that's why we're trying to go this other route to see if that would help also.
Okay, great. Yeah, that seems like a good solution. I guess I'm sorry that it's gotten this far without that having been discussed, but I am not personally privy to any discussion that's been had with them. And so I was surprised to see the dialogue that somehow the city wasn't, cooperating with them or making the park available to them, because obviously it's a large event similar to Boatnik, fewer days, but they do take over the entire park, right? So it seems like maybe if we could rent the park out to the car club the same way that we do to the active club, that might be a solution.
And again, the city will accommodate all park users to our fullest ability by what the law provides.
Thank you. Council, any questions on that topic? Rob?
So Aaron, practically speaking, what does that mean? Like, to our best ability? I mean, could people show up with their classic cars and have a tent next to them? I mean, what does that mean?
So I think ultimately what I would like to do is we've got park rules and regulations, and people can rent certain spaces in the parks. What's unique with Boatnik is they basically have the park for the whole week, the whole park. We don't really have in our park and rec fees a rental for the whole park. There's a bunch of open space that is allowed for anybody to utilize, even if you're renting a pavilion or you're renting 3 pavilions and you're renting a stage or whatever. There's still a lot of open space that we just don't have closed off to rent to somebody. So in theory, I guess, technically, the space that they would rent and utilize, there's some areas that they would have control over, and there's some areas that they may not have control over within the whole parks with the way it's usually rented throughout the season, except for Boatnik, which has the whole park to themselves for a week.
Anybody else? Okay. Yep, Vanessa? Okay, yep, back to agenda review if we're done with that. And I was just going to mention before we get in, I guess, to full-on agenda review. Well, first I'll go through our normal process here. I'll come right back to you. So normally we would read what's coming up, and our next meeting is a workshop on Monday, interviewing HBSC candidates, as well as presenting the draft of the Sustainability and Energy Action Plan, hearing some updates from the Home Builders Association, so this would be our co-meeting where we invite them to participate, and then getting an update on the historic downtown lighting.
We're also adding the the fiscal year budget discussion.
Thank you, yes, following up on today's budget discussion. And then we have a Wednesday meeting next week, a proclamation on fentanyl awareness, Drinking Water Week proclamation, a public hearing regarding the Development Code, Article 11, repealing the tree deposit requirement, a council action item that's a resolution regarding urban renewal, an urban renewal grant for the Bunnell Apartments, And then the consent calendar items are a resolution to purchase water treatment plant bulk chemicals and solids holding, and a motion that would acknowledge the March investment report and then make those HBSC candidate appointments. That gets us through next week. Then I've written down already to have a follow-up meeting regarding LB projects in the general fund, and that we've asked for HBSC and tourism committees to review the Welcome Center design and have that come back to council for a final color vote. And then also have HBSC take a look at the Parklet design guidelines and have that come back to council, and East Park Street parking. Vanessa.
I did have 2 items. I also would like to bring back the DAS grant. I think there's some unfinished business there that we need to discuss, that final amount. And then also, I wanted to ask if the council had any interest in talking about exploring a safe parking program so that we can get to the root issue of things that we see, such as East Park Street parking.
Okay. Yeah, we do have $5,000 left from the DAS grant that you need to decide how you want to appropriate that. And then is there council interest in having a safe parking discussion? Rob?
I'm interested in, I guess, knowing more about what exactly that means. If that means we need to have a discussion, that's fine. I'm just not 100% sure of what such a discussion actually would consider. But yeah, we need to do something, and I'll put it this way, I believe we need to do something to provide parking for, especially for gainfully employed homeless people that have cars. But what exactly that means, having a discussion, I'm not sure, but I do want to find out more about it. We have to have a discussion. I'd support it.
So ultimately, it would just be providing parameters. We would establish parameters that groups that want to host these parking sites would need to follow. And maybe it requires, a restroom, and it requires certain things. And then it would be an approved site that we could help communicate through our community partners.
Sarah, yeah.
Yep.
I just wanted to add, because I do know there's one over in Bend, and there's several places that I don't know if Medford has one or not, but they are run by a nonprofit. So personally, I think a great way is to say have the Path or one of these organizations who's really concerned about it, look into, because it would be a matter of finding somebody to do it. I don't think that we have the capacity to do it. So I think if it's going to come from somebody, it needs to come from the Homeless Task Force, them looking into and coordinating with a nonprofit that is actually doing it somewhere in the state. So they have, like, once again, which is what I've said all along, we don't have the staff capacity to run a program, but there are nonprofits that have been known to successfully run them, and then we could build the parameters that I think we came very close to having those parameters. We did that a few years ago.
Yeah, it's not difficult because a lot of people have already done it. It's just called, do you want to establish the parameters before there's a call for the need, or do you want to wait for the need and then establish the parameters?
Vanessa?
Yeah, I want to be abundantly clear that I am not talking about city staff operating this program. I am not talking about that at all. I can't emphasize that enough. I think the council should create guidelines on what they want to see for this type of program and then issue an RFP. That's what I would like to see.
Dwayne?
I'm going to give my okay, I guess, on this. I would just say if this is something we're going to move forward, why can't staff just give us a couple proposals and we just vote on it? I think that's all we really need to go any further is just A, B, and C. What do you want to see? And then if some group wants to take care of it, they can. I really don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but I think that could be the minimum amount. A, B, and C. This is what Ben, Redmond, wherever else is doing. What do you want them to have? And then we're done with it. And that would be my thing about the camping thing. That's all I'm going to get from me on the camping parking.
Okay, I think at this point, we're just asking, yeah, does council want to have that discussion? Do you want staff to invest some time putting together a presentation and gathering up what other communities do? So I have Vanessa and Dwayne. Is there a third? Rob? Okay. Joel?
So I need to bring up the previous topic about selling the Yankee pot roast with the proceeds going to upgrade the computers and software at the North Fire Station.
Yeah, do we have the Yankee pot roast? We don't have the Yankee pot roast at this point.
No, that has not been deeded over to us, and it won't be for months.
Okay, so we need to wait on that then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything further for agenda review today, JC?
Are we gonna bring back the property to sell? We have tons of property we were talking about before. Is that on the list there too?
I think it is May 15th, sale
Okay.
of property follow-up workshop.
I'm good with that.
JC?
Yeah, I just want to, based on the progress that we made today, but not coming to a finite completion, that we probably cancel the May 9th Budget Committee meeting, and then potentially tentatively do the May 11th. I think that'll all depend on what the next conversation comes out at, but I'm guessing that one will be postponed and we may start on the 16th.
Okay, what are the actual requirements for Budget Committee? Just,
I have to have it publicly noticed at least 5 days before, and it takes about a week for us to have that into the courier so they can do all of their mock-ups and such.
But before
And-
that, we have to have a budget.
And we'd have to have a budget before then.
okay, so the budget has to be ready, and then you give 5 days' notice about the meeting.
Yeah, there's some Oregon budget law requirements that we have to have the document viewable for the public if they want.
Okay, and then you need to have a series of 4 meetings? No. Number of meetings
Yeah,
isn't
the number
a-
of meetings aren't necessary. We're going to try and cram it into 3.
Is the completion date, it needs to be what?
So we just need to have the budget committee approve it so we can potentially bring it to the second meeting in June, which let me bring up my calendar really quick.
The
To have it
21st?
approved before July 1, and that would be the 21st.
Okay. Okay, are you all comfortable with canceling May 9th then? Because it sounds, otherwise, need to have it totally ready to go next Monday. Okay, we'll cancel May 9th for now. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Who wants to do the honors today, huh? Rick,
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
seconded by Valerie, thank you. All in favor of adjourning today, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're adjourned until next Monday.